In the quiet village of Thornwick, a clockmaker vanishes, leaving behind a cryptic note and a watch frozen at 4:13, when a wealthy antiques dealer is found murdered with a sharpened clock hand. Hercule Poirot steps in to unravel a web of greed and betrayal. A hidden diamond, a coded ledger, and a mysterious guardian of time lead Poirot through a maze of clues each tick of the clock, revealing secrets of a past theft and a killer hiding in plain sight. Can Poirot's little grey cells solve the puzzle before time runs out? Chapter 1. The Vanishing Clockmaker. In the quiet of his London apartment, Hercule Poirot sat by the window, his small neat moustache twitching as he sipped his morning tisane. The city hummed outside, but inside all was calm. Too calm, the great detective, now older, with silver threading his dark hair, felt a restlessness in his bones. His little grey cells, those clever bits of his mind that solved so many crimes, were hungry for a puzzle. For weeks, no case had come his way, no mystery had stirred his heart. He sighed, setting his cup down with a soft clink. Mon Dieu, he muttered, is the world so free of secrets that Hercule Poirot is left to count the clouds? The Morning Post brought a change. Among the usual bills and polite refusals to dull invitations, a letter caught his eye. It was written on plain paper, the handwriting shaky but clear. Poirot's sharp eyes scanned the envelope. Miss Eleanor Price, Thornwick Village, Kent. The name was new to him, but the village rang a faint bell. Thornwick, a sleepy place known for its old church and older clocks, was not the sort of spot where mysteries thrived. Yet this letter, with its urgent tone, promised something more. Poirot opened it with care, his fingers precise as always. The letter was short, but its words carried weight. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I am a simple girl from Thornwick, but I know your name. You find answers where others see only shadows. Our village needs you. Mr. Gideon Wells, our clockmaker, has vanished. His shop is empty, his tools left behind, and a strange watch sits on his desk. Stopped at 4:13. The police think he ran away, but I know better. Something is wrong. Please come. I have little money, but I will pay what I can. Yours, in hope, Eleanor Price. Poirot read the letter twice, his eyes narrowing. A missing clockmaker, a watch stopped at an odd time, a village girl with faith in his skill. It was enough to spark his curiosity. The little grey cells, they stir, he said to himself, a smile tugging at his lips. He rang for his valet, George, a steady man who knew his master's ways. George, Poirot said, prepare my suitcase. We travel to Thornwick today, and fetch my best hat, the one with the silk band. A detective must look his part. George, used to such sudden decisions, nodded. Very good, sir. Shall I book a train? We, the earliest one. Time, it seems, is at the heart of this matter. By noon, Poirot was on a train rattling through the green hills of Kent. The carriage was half empty, giving him space to think. He pulled out Miss Price's letter again, studying the words. Vanished. Strange watch. 4:13. Why 4:13? Was it a clue, a mistake, or something deeper? Clocks, Poirot knew, were more than machines. They were keepers of secrets, ticking away truths that men tried to hide. In his long career, he had solved cases with less to go. Anna, broken teacup, a torn glove. A stopped watch was a fine start. The train pulled into Thornwick Station as the sun dipped low, painting the sky pink. The village was small, with stone cottages huddled around a cobbled square. A church spire poked above the rooftops, and the air carried the faint scent of roses. Poirot stepped onto the platform, his polished shoes clicking. A young woman waited. Nearby, her brown hair tied back, her face pale with worry. She wore a simple dress, but her eyes were sharp, like someone who noticed things others missed. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, stepping forward. "Oui, I am he," Poirot said, tipping his hat. "You must be Miss Eleanor Price." She nodded, her hands twisting together. "Thank you for coming. I didn't know who else to turn to." Poirot studied her. She was young, perhaps 20, with a quiet strength. Her voice held fear, but also resolve. "Tell me, mademoiselle, of this clockmaker. Why do you think he did not run away?" Eleanor glanced around, as if the empty platform might hold spies. "Mr. Wells isn't that sort. He's old, nearly 60, but sharp as a tack. He loves his clocks. They're his life. He'd never leave his shop, not without a word. And that watch, it's not like his others. It's wrong, wrong." Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "Explain, if you please." "It's hard to say, you'll see when we get to the shop. It's like it was left on purpose, to tell us." Something. Poirot nodded. "Very well, take me to this shop. The scene of a mystery is where the truth begins to speak." They walked through the village, passing a bakery with warm bread smells and a pub where men laughed over pints. Thornwick seemed peaceful, but Poirot knew better. Peaceful places hid the darkest secrets. Eleanor led him to a narrow street where a sign read, "Gideon Wells, Clockmaker." The shop was small, its windows dark. The door creaked as Eleanor unlocked it, and Poirot stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of oil and wood. Clocks lined the walls, grandfather clocks with slow pendulums, mantel clocks with golden faces, pocket watches gleaming in glass cases. Their ticking filled the room, a chorus of time that never stopped, except for one, on a cluttered desk. Among gears and tiny screws sat a pocket watch. Its silver case was scratched, its hands frozen at 4:13. A slip of paper lay beside it, with words scrawled in black ink. "The truth ticks in silence." Poirot leaned close, his eyes sharp. The watch was old, its design simple but precise. He picked it up, feeling its weight. "This is no ordinary watch, mademoiselle. It is a message, but to whom and why?" Eleanor shook her head. "I don't know. Mr. Wells was working on it the day he disappeared. He was acting strange, locking the door, checking the windows. I thought he was just tired, but now you see, it was fear," Poirot finished. "Fear of what? We must discover." Before Eleanor could answer, heavy boots sounded outside. A man in a police uniform entered, his face stern. "Miss Price," he said, then noticed Poirot. "And who's this?" "This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot," Eleanor said. "He's here to help find Mr. Wells." The man, broad-shouldered with a moustache that rivaled Poirot's, frowned. "Inspector Hardy, local police." "No need for outsiders, Miss Price. I've got this under control." Poirot smiled, unruffled. "Inspector, I am merely a visitor with a curiosity for puzzles. Tell me, what do you make of this disappearance?" Hardy shrugged. "Simple enough. Wells got into debt, maybe a bad deal. Packed up and left. Happens all the time. And the watch," Poirot pointed to the desk, "stopped at 4:13, with a note. You think this, too, is simple?" Hardy's frown deepened. "Just a broken watch. Means nothing." Poirot's smile widened. "To you, perhaps. To Hercule Poirot, it is a whisper of truth. Tell me, Inspector, Have you searched the shop? Of course, Hardy said. Nothing but clocks and junk. Though he hesitated. Someone broke in 2 nights ago. Took some rare gears, expensive. One's probably Wells selling off stock before he skipped town. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A theft, you say? Most interesting. And yet you believe he ran away. Nan, Inspector. The pieces do not fit your puzzle. Hardy bristled, but before he could argue, a shout came from the street. A boy, no older than 12, ran to the door, panting. Inspector, Miss Price, you've got to come. They found something at Mr. Carver's house. Carver, Eleanor's face paled. The antiques man. The boy nodded. He's dead. Stabbed, they say. It's awful. Poirot's moustache twitched. A missing clockmaker, a stopped watch, a theft, and now a murder. The little grey cells were awake now, buzzing with delight. Lead the way, young man, he said. Hercule Poirot does not rest when death calls. Chapter 2. The Workshop of Secrets. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway of Gideon Wells' clock shop, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The air was heavy with the smell of polished wood and metal oil. Clocks ticked all around him, their sounds blending into a steady hum like a heartbeat. Tall grandfather clocks lined one wall, their pendulums swinging slowly. Small pocket watches gleamed in glass cases, catching the dim light. On the workbench, tools were scattered, tiny screwdrivers, gears, and springs, left as if their owner might return any moment. But the centre of Poirot's attention was the silver pocket watch on the desk, its hands frozen at 4:13. Next to it, a scrap of paper bore the words, "The truth ticks in silence." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A watch that does not tick," he murmured, "is a watch with a story to tell." Eleanor Price stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly. Her brown eyes darted around the shop, as if expecting Mr. Wells to step out from behind a clock. "It's so quiet without him," she said. "He was always here, working, humming to himself. Now it feels wrong." Poirot nodded, his mind already racing. "Tell me, Mademoiselle Price, what was Mr. Wells like?" "A man who makes clocks is a man of order, Nan, but a man who vanishes, that is not so orderly." Eleanor hesitated, choosing her words. "He was kind but private. He taught me about clocks, how to set the gears, balance the weights. But lately he was different, nervous. He'd lock the door, even in the daytime, and check the windows. Once I saw him hide something in his desk, but he wouldn't tell me what." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Something hidden, you say? Let us see what secrets this desk holds." He moved to the workbench, his movements precise, like a cat stalking a shadow. The desk was old, its wood scratched from years of use. Drawers were stuffed with paper sketches of clock designs, receipts for brass and steel. Poirot's fingers traced the edges, searching for anything out of place. He paused at a panel that felt too smooth, too perfect, with a gentle press. It clicked, revealing a hidden drawer. Eleanor gasped. "I never knew that was there." Inside was a small leather book, its pages yellowed. Poirot opened it carefully. The writing was tight, almost unreadable, filled with numbers and strange symbols. "A ledger," he said, "but not for ordinary business. This is a code, mademoiselle. Your Mr. Wells was keeping secrets." "What kind of secrets?" Eleanor asked, leaning closer. "That," Poirot said, slipping the ledger into his pocket, "is what Hercule Poirot will discover." Before they could explore further, Inspector Hardy's heavy footsteps echoed outside. He burst in, his face red from running. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Price, you're needed at Carver's house. It's worse than we thought. He's been murdered, stabbed clean through." Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "Mr. Carver, the antiques man." "The same," Hardy said grimly. "Found this morning by his housekeeper. We're heading there now. You coming, or you sticking to your clocks?" Poirot's smile was thin. "Inspector, a clock may stop, but a crime does not. Lead the way." The walk to Thomas Carver's house was short but tense. Thornwick's cobbled streets were alive with whispers. Villagers stood in doorways, their faces pale, muttering about. The murder. Poirot noticed everything: the baker wiping flour from his hands, the old woman clutching her shawl, the boy who'd brought the news now trailing behind, wide-eyed. Thornwick was no stranger to gossip, but murder was new. Carver's house stood at the edge of the village, a grand place with ivy climbing its walls. Its windows were dark, like eyes that had seen too much. A small crowd had gathered outside, held back by a young constable. Hardy pushed through, Poirot and Eleanor following. Inside, the air was cold, heavy with the smell of polish and something sharper blood. The parlour was a mess of wealth and chaos. Glass cases held old vases and silver spoons. Paintings hung crooked on the walls. In the centre, sprawled across a rug, was Thomas Carver. He was a heavy man, his fine suit stained red. A long, sharp clock hand, like a dagger, was buried in his chest. Beside him, a mantel clock lay smashed. Its hands stopped at 4:13. Poirot knelt, his eyes tracing every detail. "The same time," he said softly. 4:13, the watch in the shop, the clock here. This is no coincidence." Hardy snorted. "Coincidence or not, it's clear enough. Wells killed Carver, left that watch as some mad clue, and ran off. Case closed." Poirot stood, brushing dust from his knees. "Nan, Inspector, if Monsieur Wells wished to flee, why leave a watch to point to himself? Why use a clock hand to kill?" "No, this is a message, and we must read it." Eleanor stared at the body, her face pale. "Mr. Carver came to the shop sometimes. He bought clocks from Mr. Wells. They argued last week, something about a special order." Poirot's head tilted. "A special order? Tell me more." "I don't know much," Eleanor said. "Mr. Wells was working on a big clock, something fancy. He said it was for an important client, but he wouldn't name them. Mr. Carver wanted it, but Mr. Wells refused to sell." "Most interesting," Poirot said. He turned to Hardy. "And you, Inspector, what do you know of this Carver?" Hardy shrugged. "Rich, loud, liked old things. Clocks, paintings, jewels. Had a temper, too. His housekeeper, Mrs. Dunham, said he fought with a stranger a few days ago, a man in a dark coat. Could be Wells." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A man in a dark coat. We shall see." He moved to the smashed clock, picking up a shard of its glass face. The gears inside were tangled, but one piece caught his arduous small brass cog, etched with a tiny star. He slipped it into his pocket, unnoticed by Hardy. "This clock," he said, "it is one of Monsieur Wells' designs, is it not?" Eleanor nodded. "I recognize the style. He made it last year." "Then we have a link," Poirot said. "The watch, the clock, the murder, all point back to the clockmaker's shop. We must return there, mademoiselle, and search again." Hardy crossed his arms. "You're wasting time, Poirot. Wells is gone, and this murder's fresh. I'm rounding up men to search the woods. He can't have gone far. Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. Search, if you must, Inspector, but Hercule Poirot searches with the mind, not the feet. The truth is here, in this room, in that shop. We will find it. Back at the clock shop, the evening light cast long shadows across the floor. The ticking seemed louder now, as if the clocks knew something Poirot did not. He sat at the workbench, the ledger open before him. Its pages were puzzle numbers in columns, but not prices or dates. Symbols dotted the margins, stars, circles, lines. A code, Poirot said, but not a simple one. Monsieur Wells was clever. He hid his secrets well. Eleanor watched him, her hands twisting. Can you read it? In time, Poirot said. The little grey cells, they work slowly but surely. Tell me, mademoiselle, did Monsieur Wells ever speak of enemies, or of something valuable, something worth hiding? Eleanor thought hard. He mentioned a client once, someone important. He said the job would change everything. But he was scared, too. He kept looking over his shoulder, like someone was watching. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping the ledger. And this client, did he give a name? No, Eleanor said. But there was a letter, a fancy one with a red seal. He burned it after reading it. A red seal, Poirot repeated. We must find who sent that letter. As night fell, Poirot stayed in the shop, his eyes moving from the ledger to the watch to the tools scattered around. The clocks ticked on. Chapter 3. The Murder. Seen Hercule Poirot stood in the parlour of Thomas Carver's grand house, his sharp eyes taking in every detail. The room was a showcase of wealth, with polished wood floors, heavy velvet curtains, and glass cases filled with old treasures, silver candlesticks, porcelain figurines, and clocks of every kind. But the beauty was marred by the grim sight at the centre. Thomas Carver's body, sprawled on a thick rug, a sharp clock hand plunged into his chest. The air carried a faint metallic temps, mixed with the musty smell of old things. Beside the body, a mantel clock lay in pieces, its glass face shattered, its hands frozen at 4:13, the same time as the pocket watch in Gideon Wells. Poirot's moustache twitched as he knelt beside the body, his movements careful, like a painter studying a canvas. Mon Dieu, he murmured, a clock hand as a weapon. This is not a crime of passion, but of purpose. Eleanor Price stood near the doorway, her face pale, her hands gripping her skirt. It's awful, she whispered. Who would do this? Inspector Hardy, his broad shoulders filling the room, snorted. Who else but Wells? He disappears, leaves that watch with a creepy note, and now Carver's dead with one of his clock hands. It's plain as day. Poirot's eyes flicked to Hardy, a faint smile on his lips. Plain, Inspector. To Hercule Poirot, nothing is plain until the little grey cells have spoken. Let us examine this scene before we judge. He leaned closer to the body. Carver was a large man, his face frozen in a look of surprise, his eyes wide. His fine suit was torn where the clock hand had struck, and a dark stain spread across his shirt. Poirot noted the man's hands, one clenched, the other open, as if reaching for something. A gold ring was missing from his left hand, leaving a pale band of skin. Interesting, Poirot said, pointing to the finger. A ring was here, but no longer. Stolen, perhaps. Hardy shrugged. Could have fallen off, or he pawned it. Carver liked his money. Poirot's smile tightened. A man like Carver does not pawn his rings, Inspector. No, this is a clue. We must find that ring. He turned to the smashed clock. Its wooden case was splintered, its gears scattered like broken teeth. The hands, bent but clear, pointed to 4:13. Poirot picked up a shard of glass, turning it in the light. "This clock," he said, "is one of Monsieur Wells' making, is it not, Mademoiselle Price?" Eleanor nodded, her voice shaky. "Yes, I've seen that design before. Mr. Wells made it for Mr. Carver last spring. It was special, with a star pattern on the face." "A star," Poirot repeated, his eyes gleaming. He slipped a small brass cog from the wreckage into his pocket, unnoticed by Hardy. The cog had a faint star etched on it, like the one he'd found in the workshop. The time, for 13. The star, the clock hand. These are not accidents. They are a message. Hardy crossed his arms. "You're seeing things that aren't there, Poirot. Wells killed Carver, smashed the clock to throw us off, and ran. I've got men searching the riverbank where we found his coat. We'll have him by morning." Poirot stood, brushing dust from his coat. "You searched the river, Inspector, but Hercule Poirot searches the truth. This murder is tied to the clockmaker's disappearance, but not as you think. Tell me, what do you know of Carver?" Hardy rubbed his chin. "Thomas Carver, 52, antiques dealer. Rich as they come, but not well liked. Always flashing his money, buying up old clocks and jewels. Mrs. Dunham, his housekeeper, said he had enemies. He argued with a man in a dark coat 2 days ago, out in the garden. She didn't hear much, just shouting. 'A man in a dark coat,' Poirot said, his voice soft. 'The same man, perhaps, who stole gears from Monsieur Wells' shop.'" Hardy frowned. "Maybe we're looking into it." Poirot turned to Eleanor. "And you, mademoiselle? What did you know of Carver's dealings with Monsieur Wells?" Eleanor bit her lip. "They weren't friends. Mr. Carver came to the shop often, always asking for rare clocks or parts. Last week, they argued about a special commissioner, big clock Mr. Wells was making for someone else. Mr. Carver wanted to buy it, but Mr. Wells said no. He was firm about it. Most interesting, Poirot said. A special commission, for whom? He wouldn't say, Eleanor replied. He just said it was important, and he couldn't break his promise. Poirot's fingers tapped his chin. A promise, a clock, a murder. The pieces, they begin to form a picture, but it is not yet clear. He moved through the parlour, his eyes scanning the shelves. Carver's collection was vast clocks of gold and brass, some ticking, others silent. One caught his attention. A small pocket watch in a glass case. Its hands also stopped at 4:13. Poirot opened the case, lifting the watch carefully. It was heavy, its back engraved with the initials G.W. Gideon Wells. "Another link," he said. "This watch, too, is Monsieur Wells' work. Why for 13? What does it mean?" Hardy snorted again. "It means Wells is mad. He's leaving his mark, like some kind of game." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A game, perhaps, but not his. Someone wishes us to think Monsieur Wells is the killer, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily fooled." The housekeeper, Mrs. Dunham, entered, her face drawn. She was a thin woman, her grey hair pulled tight, her hands trembling. "Oh, sir," she said to Hardy, "it's terrible. Mr. Carver was a hard man, but to die like this." Poirot turned to her, his voice gentle. "Madame Dunham, tell me about this argument in the garden. The man in the dark coat, what did you see?" She hesitated, glancing at Hardy. "Not much, sir. It was evening, and I was in the kitchen. I heard Mr. Carver shouting, something about a deal gone wrong. The other man had a low voice, hard to hear. He wore a long coat and a hat pulled low. I couldn't see his face. And after this argument, Poirot pressed. Mr. Carver was angry all night, she said. He kept pacing, muttering about clocks and someone owing him. The next day, he went to Mr. Wells' shop. That was the last I saw him." "Alive?" Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Merci, madame. You have been most helpful." As Hardy questioned Mrs. Dunham further, Poirot returned to the body, his eyes lingering on the clock hand. It was long, sharp, and heavy, meant for a large clock, not a mantle one. "This weapon," he said, "was chosen with care. It is a symbol, meant to point us to the clockmaker. But why? To accuse, or to distract?" Eleanor shivered. "Do you think Mr. Wells is dead, too?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Nan, mademoiselle, I believe he lives, hiding, perhaps, waiting for the right moment. This murder, this watch, this clocks, they are parts of his puzzle. We must find him before the killer does." The room grew quiet, the only sound the ticking of the surviving clocks. Poirot felt the weight of the case settling on his shoulders. A missing man, a murdered man, a time that kept appearing. The little grey cells were awake, turning over each detail, searching for the thread that would tie them together. Outside, the village of Thornwick was settling into night. Lanterns glowed in the windows, and the church bell tolled softly. Poirot stepped into the garden, needing air to think. The stars were bright, and the air was cool. He pulled the brass cog from his pocket, its star etching glinting in the moonlight. "A star," he said to himself, "a time, a secret. Hercule Poirot will find you, Monsieur Wells, and the truth you hide." Chapter 4. The village suspects. Hercule Poirot walked through the cobbled streets of Thornwick, his polished shoes clicking softly in the morning light. The village was awake, but a heavy quiet hung over it, like a blanket smothering whispers of fear. News of Thomas Carver's murder had spread, and every glance from a shop window or passing villager carried suspicion. Poirot's sharp eyes missed nothing. The baker pausing mid-sweep, the postman lingering too long at a gate, the children whispering as they pointed at him. Thornwick was a place of secrets, and the little grey cells in Poirot's mind were eager to uncover them. Eleanor Price walked beside him, her face pale but determined. She clutched a small notebook, her fingers tight around its edges. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "where are we going?" "The shop's the other way." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign his mind was at work. "Mademoiselle, the shop holds clues. But the heart of this mystery lies with people. Monsieur Wells is missing, Monsieur Carver is dead, and both are tied to this village. We must meet those who knew them best. Their words, their glances, their lies, they will tell us what the clocks cannot." Eleanor nodded, though her eyes flicked nervously to the houses around them. "Who first?" Poirot adjusted his hat, the silk band catching the sun. "We begin with Lord Reginald Ashford, a man of wealth, a collector of clocks, and, I suspect, a keeper of secrets." They turned toward Ashford Manor, a grand stone house at the edge of Thornwick. Its tall gates were iron, its gardens neat with roses, blooming red against green hedges. A butler, stiff as a clock's pendulum, let them in, leading them to a drawing room where Lord Ashford waited. He was tall, with silver hair and a face lined by time, his eyes cold but curious. A gold pocket watch hung from his vest, ticking. "Softly, Monsieur Poirot," Ashford said, his voice smooth as polished wood. "I've heard of you. The famous detective, come to our little village. I'm honored, though I wonder why." Poirot bowed slightly, his smile polite but sharp. "The honor is mine, Lord Ashford. I am here because of a puzzle. Monsieur Gideon Wells has vanished, and Monsieur Thomas Carver lies dead. You, I understand, were a friend to both." Ashford's eyes flickered, but his face stayed calm. "Friend is a strong word. I knew them. Wells made clocks for me fine ones. Carver sold me antiques, but I know nothing of their troubles." Poirot's fingers tapped his chin. "And yet, monsieur, I hear of a special commission a clock Wells was crafting for an important client. Was that client you?" Ashford hesitated, just a moment too long. "I did ask Wells for a unique piece, yes. A clock with a star design for my collection, but he hadn't finished it. As for Carver, he pestered me about it, wanting to buy it. Before it was done, I told him no." "Most interesting," Poirot said. He glanced at the mantel, where a tall clock stood, its face carved with stars. Its hands moved smoothly, unlike the frozen ones at 4:13. "This clock, it is Wells' work, Nan." Ashford nodded. "One of his best. Cost me a fortune." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes tracing the star pattern. "A fortune, you say? And what would a man do to protect such a fortune? Or to gain one?" Ashford's jaw tightened. "If you're suggesting I had anything to do with Carver's death or Wells' disappearance, you're mistaken." Poirot's smile was gentle, but his eyes were like needles. "I suggest nothing, monsieur. I only ask. The truth, it hides in the questions." As they left the manor, Eleanor whispered, "He's hiding something, isn't he?" Poirot nodded. "Oui, mademoiselle. But what and why? We shall see." Their next stop was the home of Clara Beaumont, a wealthy widow who lived in a neat cottage with lace curtains. She was a striking woman, with dark hair and sharp green eyes, her dress elegant despite the early hour. She greeted them with a smile, offering tea. But Poirot sensed a guarded edge to her warmth. "Mrs. Beaumont," Poirot began, sipping his tea with care. "You knew Monsieur Carver well, I understand." Clara's smile didn't falter, but her fingers tightened on her cup. "We were acquaintances. He dealt in antiques, and I have a taste for fine things. We spoke often." "Spoke, or more?" Poirot asked, his voice soft but direct. "There are whispers, madame, of a closer bond." Clara's eyes flashed. "Village gossip. Thomas was charming, but our dealings were business. He wanted to sell me a clock, one of Wells' designs. I refused. I prefer paintings." Poirot noted the lie in her voice, slight but there. "And Monsieur Wells? Did you know him?" "Barely," she said. "I saw him at his shop once or twice. He was odd, always muttering about time and secrets." Poirot leaned forward. "Secrets, you say? What kind?" Clara shrugged, her smile returning. "Who knows? He was old, maybe a bit mad. People talk, Monsieur Poirot. It means nothing." But to Poirot it meant everything. As they left, he said, "To Eleanor, Madame Beaumont knows more than she says. Her eyes, they betray her." The third visit was to Victor Lang, a rival clockmaker whose shop sat at the village's edge. Lang was a wiry man, his hands stained with oil, his eyes narrow with suspicion. His shop was smaller than Wells, cluttered with half-finished clocks and tools. The air smelled of metal and resentment. "What do you want?" Lang snapped, barely looking up from a gear he was polishing. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot said, his voice calm, "I seek the truth about Gideon Wells. You were his rival, Nan." Lang's hands stilled. Rival. He was the village darling, always. Getting the best clients, like Lord Ashford. I worked just as hard, but Wells had the name. "And this made you angry?" Poirot asked. Lang's eyes met his, hard and cold. "Sure, I was angry. But I didn't make him disappear, if that's what you're thinking. And Carver, good riddance. He cheated everyone, including me." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Cheated? How so?" "He sold me a clock, said it was rare. It was junk. I lost money, but I didn't kill him." Poirot noted the bitterness in Lang's voice, the way his hands shook. "And the theft at Wells' shop, the rare gears stolen." Lang's face reddened. "I had nothing to do with that. Ask anyone. I was at the pub that night." "A convenient alibi," Poirot said, smiling. "We shall check it." Their final stop was Dr. Simon Holt, the village physician, who lived in a tidy house near the church. Holt was a thin man with nervous hands, his glasses slipping down his nose. He welcomed them into his study, where medical books lined the walls, and a small clock ticked on his desk, another of Wells' designs, its hands moving smoothly. "Double quotes Dr. Holt," Poirot said. "You certified Monsieur Carver's death, did you?" "Know him well." Holt adjusted his glasses, his voice unsteady. "Not well. I treated him for a cough once. He was difficult. Always asking about rare clocks, wanting to know if I'd seen Wells working on anything unusual." "And had you?" Poirot pressed. Holt hesitated. "Once, Wells showed me a sketch, a clock with a hidden compartment. He said it was for a special client. I didn't think much of it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A hidden compartment. Most interesting. And this clock, where is it now?" "I don't know," Holt said quickly. "Wells never showed it to me again." As they left, Poirot said to Eleanor, "The good doctor is nervous. He knows more than he tells. Like the others, he hides a piece of the puzzle." Back in the village square, the church bell rang, its sound heavy in the air. Poirot paused, his mind turning over the day's meetings. Ashford's cold eyes, Clara's guarded smile, Lang's anger, Holt's nerves, all pieces of a larger picture. The 4:13 time, the star symbol, the coded ledger, they were threads in a web, and Gideon Wells was at its center. Eleanor looked at him, her voice soft. "What now, Monsieur Poirot?" "Now," he said, "we return to the shop. The ledger, the watch, the clues, they wait for us. And Hercule Poirot does not keep the truth waiting." Chapter 5. The coded ledger. Hercule Poirot sat at the workbench in Gideon Wells' clock shop. The small leather ledger open before him. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp that cast long shadows across the walls. Clocks ticked all around, their steady rhythm like a pulse in the quiet night. The silver pocket watch, still stopped at 4:13, lay beside the ledger, its scratched case gleaming faintly. The cryptic note, "The truth ticks in silence," rested nearby, its words heavy with meaning Poirot had yet to unravel. His fingers, neat and precise, turned the ledger's yellowed pages, his sharp eyes scanning the tight rows of numbers and strange symbols. Eleanor Price stood across from him, her brown hair loose after a long day, her eyes tired but alert. "You read it," Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice soft in the stillness. "Is it really a code?" "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his moustache twitching as he traced a line of symbols: a star, a circle, a jagged line. "This is no ordinary record of sales. Monsieur Wells hid his secrets in these pages, and Hercule Poirot will uncover them, but it requires patience. The little grey cells, they must work slowly to see clearly." Eleanor leaned closer, pointing to a page. "These numbers, some look like dates, but others don't make sense. And the stars. Mr. Wells loved stars. He carved them into his best clocks." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Stars, you say? A pattern begins to form. Tell me, mademoiselle, did Monsieur Wells ever speak of a clock called Ashford's Folly?" Eleanor frowned, thinking. "Not that I remember. But he did mention Lord Ashford a lot. Said he was his best client, always asking for special designs. Once he showed me a sketch of a clock with a star on its face. Said it was for someone important. Could that be it?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, flipping to a page where the word Ashford appeared beside a string of numbers. "This ledger mentions Ashford's Folly next to a large sum. A clock, I think, but not just any clock. One with a purpose beyond telling time." Before Eleanor could reply, heavy boots thudded outside. Inspector Hardy burst into the shop, his face red with urgency. "Poirot, Miss Price, you need to come quick. We found something by the river." Poirot closed the ledger, slipping it into his coat. "What is it, Inspector?" "Wells' coat," Hardy said grimly, "caught on some rocks by the Thornwick River. Looks like he might have drowned." Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, Mr. Wells wouldn't. He couldn't." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice calm but firm. "Show me, Inspector. The truth does not drown so easily." They hurried through the village, the night air cool and sharp. Lanterns bobbed in the hands of villagers gathered near the riverbank, their whispers buzzing like flies. The Thornwick River ran swift and dark, its surface glinting under the moon. A constable held up a soaked wool coat, its buttons stamped with Wells' initials. G.W. Poirot examined it, noting a torn pocket and mud-stained sleeves. "This is indeed Monsieur Wells' coat," he said, "but a coat is not a body." "You assume too quickly." Inspector Hardy crossed his arms. "What else could it mean? He fell in, or jumped, or someone pushed him. Either way, he's gone." Poirot's smile was thin. "None, Inspector. A man who leaves a watch at 4:13, a coded ledger, and a note about truth does not simply fall into a river. This coat is another clue, meant to mislead. We must look closer." He turned to Eleanor. "Mademoiselle, he said Monsieur Wells was nervous, locking doors, hiding things. Did he ever speak of the river or of leaving Thornwick?" Eleanor shook her head. "Never. He loved this village. Said his clocks belonged here, with the church bells and the quiet. He wouldn't leave, not like this." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Then we return to the ledger and to Lord Ashford. His name appears too often to be chance. We must see this Ashford's Folly for ourselves." The next morning, Poirot and Eleanor walked to Ashford Manor, the sun climbing over the hills. The manor's stone walls loomed tall, its windows catching the light like watchful eyes. The butler led them to the same drawing room, where Lord Ashford stood by a fireplace, his silver hair neat, his expression guarded. "Monsieur Poirot," Ashford said, his voice cool, "back so soon. And with questions, I presume." "Always questions," Monsieur Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I am told of a clock Ashford's Folly, commissioned by you from Monsieur Wells. May I see it? Ashford's eyes flickered, but he nodded. It's in the library. Follow me. The library was a vast room, its shelves heavy with leather-bound books. At its center stood a tall clock, its wooden case carved with stars, its face glowing with gold. The hands moved smoothly, ticking past 9 o'clock. Poirot stepped closer, his fingers brushing the wood. A fine piece, he said. Monsieur Wells was a master, but this clock, it has a secret, Nan. Ashford Richford hesitated, his lips tight. It's just a clock, Poirot. Wells was fond of tricks, but I know nothing of hidden compartments or secrets. Poirot's smile was sharp. Tricks, you say? Then let us play his game. He examined the clock, his eyes catching a faint seam in the base. With a gentle press, a small panel clicked open, revealing a hidden space, empty but large enough. For something smaller jewel, perhaps. Most interesting, he murmured. A clock that hides as well as it ticks. Ashford's face paled slightly. I don't know what Wells put there. He delivered the clock last month, said it was complete. Poirot nodded, his mind turning over the possibilities. A hidden compartment, a missing clockmaker, a murdered man. The ledger's code was the key, and he needed time to crack it. Back at the shop, Poirot pored over the ledger, Eleanor at his side. The numbers and symbols began to form a pattern. Dates, sums, and names, including Ashford, Carver, and a third, Holt. A transaction, Poirot said, but for what? A clock, a jewel, or something more dangerous? As night fell, a noise. Outside the shop, a rustle, a shadow made Eleanor jump. Poirot's hand went to his pocket, where the brass cog with the star rested. Someone watches us, he said softly. The truth is close, and the killer knows it. Chapter 6. The star's secret Hercule Poirot stood motionless in the dim clock shop, his hand still on the brass cog in his pocket, its star engraving cool against his fingers. The rustle outside had faded, but the air felt heavy, charged with the presence of an unseen watcher. Eleanor Price clutched the edge of the workbench, her eyes wide, darting toward the shop's dark windows. The relentless ticking of clocks filled the silence, a reminder that time, for Gideon Wells, had run out. Mademoiselle, Poirot said, his voice low but steady, lock the door. We are not alone, but we must not be distracted. The ledger will speak, and Hercule Poirot will listen. Eleanor hurried to the door, turning the heavy bolt with a click. She returned, her face pale but resolute. Who's out there, Monsieur Poirot? The killer. Perhaps, Poirot said, opening the ledger once more. Or someone who fears what we will find. This code, it hides a transaction. A secret tied to Ashford's Folly and this mysterious Holt. We must decipher it before our shadow grows. Bolder, he spread the ledger's pages under the lamp, its light illuminating rows of numbers, symbols, and names. Poirot's finger traced a line. Ashford, 500, star circle jagged line, 4/13. Below it, another, Holt, 200, circle star, 4/13. The date matched the stopped time on Wells' pocket watch. This for 13, Poirot murmured. It is no coincidence. Something happened that day, something worth killing for. Eleanor pointed to the symbols. The star again. Mr. Wells used it in his designs. But why in the ledger? And who is Holt? Poirot's mustache twitched as he considered. Holt, I suspect, is the third point in a triangle. Ashford, Carver, and Holt. A deal, perhaps, with Wells as the craftsman. But what did they trade? Not merely a clock, I think. He tapped the brass cog. This star may be more than decoration. It is a key to the code. He turned to a blank page in his notebook and began sketching the symbols, pairing them with numbers and names. The star, he hypothesized, marked a payment received. The circle, a delivery. The jagged line, a debt unpaid. Slowly, a pattern emerged. Ashford paid large sums, Carver smaller ones, and Holt appeared only twice, both times on 4/13. A transaction completed that day, Poirot said. But for what? And why did Wells stop his watch? A soft knock at the door broke his focus. Eleanor froze. Poirot raised a finger to his lips, then moved silently to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. A figure stood in the shadows, tall and broad, too far to identify. The knock came again, sharper now. "Who's there?" Eleanor called, her voice trembling. "Constable Evans," came the reply, gruff but familiar. "Inspector Hardy sent." "Me? Said you might need help." Poirot opened the door a crack, his eyes sharp. The constable stood alone, his lantern casting a weak glow. "What is this help, Monsieur Evans?" Poirot asked. "Hardy's at the station," Evans said. "Found a witness, a fisherman, who saw Wells by the river on April 13th. Says he was arguing with a man didn't see who." "Thought you'd want to know." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Most interesting. And this fisherman, where is he now?" "Back at his cottage, by the river. Hardy's waiting for you." Poirot turned to Eleanor. "Stay here, mademoiselle. Lock the door behind me. The ledger must be guarded. I will return soon." Eleanor nodded, her hands tightening on the workbench. "Be careful, Monsieur Poirot." The night was cold as Poirot followed Evans to the river, the village streets quiet but for the occasional creak of a sign in the wind. The fisherman's cottage was a small, weathered building, its windows glowing faintly. Inside, Inspector Hardy sat with a wiry man, his hands rough from years of nets and oars. The fisherman, Tom Baines, looked up as Poirot entered, his eyes wary. "Monsieur Baines," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "you saw Gideon Wells on April 13th. Tell me, what did you hear?" Baines shifted uncomfortably. "Was near dusk, by the riverbank. Wells was there. Token heated like, with another man. Couldn't see the other's face too dark. Heard Wells say something about a star and no more payments. The other man shouted back, said Wells'd regret it. Then they were gone." Poirot's mind raced. This star did Wells hold anything? A cog, perhaps? Baines shook his head. "Didn't see nothing, just heard the word star." Poirot thanked him and stepped outside with Hardy. "Inspector, this argument confirms it. Wells was involved in something dangerous, something tied to the ledger and that clock. We must find this Holt." Back at the shop, Eleanor was waiting, the ledger still open. "Did you learn anything?" she asked. "We, Poirot, said a quarrel by the river about a star and payments. The pieces fit, but the picture is not yet clear." He sat, studying the ledger again. The symbols aligned. The star marked payments to Wells, the circle, deliveries to Ashford, and the jagged line debts to Holt. "Holt," Poirot said, "is the key. A man owed something, perhaps a jewel hidden in Ashford's folly. A sudden crash outside made them both jump." Poirot sprang to the window, but the street was empty, save for a broken crate near the shop's door. "A warning," he said, his voice grim. "Someone does not want us to find Holt." He turned to Eleanor. "Tomorrow we visit the manor again. Lord Ashford knows more than he says. But tonight we cracked this code. The little grey cells, they will not rest. As the clocks ticked, on Poirot worked, his pencil flying over the ledger's secrets. The star, the circle, the jagged line, they were threads. Chapter 7. The Widow's Tale. Hercule Poirot walked through the quiet streets of Thornwick, the morning mist curling around the cobblestones like a soft veil. The village was waking slowly, its usual cheer dampened by the shadow of Thomas Carver's murder and Gideon Wells' disappearance. Shopkeepers swept their steps with quick, nervous glances, and the church bell tolled a single, mournful note. Poirot's polished shoes clicked steadily, his neat moustache twitching as his mind turned over the puzzle before him. The silver pocket watch stopped at 4:13. The cryptic note, the truth, ticks in silence, and the brass gear etched with the same time all pointed to a deeper truth. The little grey cells, as he called his sharp mind, were alive with questions. Eleanor Price walked beside him, her brown hair tucked under a simple scarf, her eyes scanning the village as if expecting danger. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "where are we going today?" "Back to the shop." Poirot adjusted his hat, the silk band catching a stray beam of sunlight. "Nan, mademoiselle. Today we seek answers from a lady who knows more than she shares. Madame Clara Beaumont, the widow with a taste for fine things. She was close to Monsieur Carver, and I suspect she holds a piece of our puzzle." Eleanor frowned. "Mrs. Beaumont, she's always so polite, but distant, like she's hiding something behind her smile." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Precisely, mademoiselle. The smile, it is a mask, and Hercule Poirot will see what lies beneath." They reached Clara Beaumont's cottage, a neat house with white walls and lace curtains that fluttered in the breeze. Roses bloomed in the garden, their scent sweet but heavy, like a secret to long kept. Clara opened the door herself, her dark hair swept up, her green eyes sharp despite the early hour. She wore a dress of soft blue, elegant but not flashy, and her smile was warm, though Poirot noted a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Price," Clara said, stepping aside. "What a surprise. Come in, please." "Would you like tea, merci, madame?" Poirot said, bowing slightly. "Tea would be most pleasant, but it is answers I seek today." Clara's smile tightened as she led them to a cozy parlour. The room was filled with fine things, paintings of stormy seas, a silver tea set, a small clock on the mantel that ticked softly. It was one of Wells' designs, its face plain but precise. Poirot noted its hands moving smoothly, not stopped at 4:13, like the others. "A lovely clock," he said, his voice light. "Monsieur Wells' work, Nan?" Clara nodded, pouring tea with steady hands. "Yes, I bought it last year. Gideon was talented, though a bit odd, always talking about time as if it held secrets." Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes never leaving her. "And Monsieur Carver, did he too speak of secrets? Or perhaps of a certain diamond, a star diamond, hidden in a clock?" Clara's cup rattled against its saucer just for a moment. She set it down, her smile returning. "A diamond, that sounds like one of Thomas's wild stories. He loved talk of treasures, always chasing something rare. But I never heard of a star diamond." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet, madame, I hear whispers that you and Monsieur Carver were close, more than acquaintances, perhaps." Clara's eyes flashed, but her voice stayed calm. "Village gossip, Monsieur Poirot. Thomas was charming, yes, and we dined together sometimes. He wanted to sell me clocks, paintings, anything to make a profit. But it was business, nothing more. Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but sharp. Business, you say? Yet I hear of an argument, madame. Monsieur Carver was seen shouting with someone at his house days before his death. Was that you? Clara's fingers tightened on her chair. No, I told the inspector I wasn't there. Thomas had many enemies. He cheated people, made deals he couldn't keep. Ask Victor Langhe hated Thomas for selling him a fake clock. Most interesting, Poirot said, his smile polite but piercing. And Monsieur Wells? Did you know of his work on a special clock, one with a hidden compartment? Clara shook her head too quickly. I know nothing of that. Gideon was private. He barely spoke to me. Poirot nodded, though he saw the lie in her eyes. Mercy. Madame, you have been most helpful. As they left the cottage, Eleanor whispered, She's not telling the truth, is she? Nan, Mademoiselle Poirot said. Madame Beaumont knows of the diamond, and perhaps of the clock. But why does she'll hide it? Fear or guilt? We shall see. They returned to Wells' shop, the air inside thick with the scent of oil and wood. The clocks ticked on, their rhythm a steady reminder of time slipping away. Poirot opened the coded ledger, its pages a maze of numbers and symbols. Eleanor pointed to an entry. Star Diamond, Ashford, 413. What does it mean? She asked. Poirot's fingers traced the words. A jewel, hidden in a clock, commissioned by Lord Ashford. The time, for 13, is a key. But to what? A moment, a memory, a crime. As evening fell, the shop grew darker, the shadows stretching long. Poirot and Eleanor worked by lamplight, sorting through Wells' sketches. One showed a clock with a star-shaped gear, its notes mentioning a silent chime. Poirot's eyes narrowed the chime again. We are close, mademoiselle. A sudden noise, a scrape at the back door, made Eleanor gasp. Poirot held up a hand, his voice low, quiet. Someone is here. He moved silently to the door, his hand on the brass, cog in his pocket. The lock rattled, then stopped, as if the intruder sensed they were not alone. Poirot flung open the door, but the alley was empty, only a faint rustle fading into the night. Mon Dieu, he said, they are bold, this one, but careless. Eleanor clutched her notebook, her voice shaking. Was it the killer? Perhaps. Poirot said, his eyes scanning the darkness. Or perhaps Monsieur Wells, watching from the shadows. We must be careful, mademoiselle. The truth is near, and it brings danger. Chapter 8. The Rival's Motive. Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway of Victor Lang's clock shop, his sharp eyes scanning the cluttered space. The air was thick with the smell of metal and oil, a stark contrast to the polished order of Gideon. Wells' workshop. Shelves sagged under the weight of half-finished clocks, their gears and springs tangled like forgotten promises. Tools were strewn across a worn workbench, and a single lantern cast flickering shadows on the walls. The ticking here was uneven, chaotic, as if the clocks themselves were angry. Poirot's neat moustache twitched, his mind already piecing together the puzzle of Thornwick's secrets. Eleanor Price stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly, her brown eyes wary. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, Mr. Lang doesn't like visitors. He's always been bitter about Mr. Wells. Poirot nodded, adjusting his hat with a precise flick. Bitterness, mademoiselle, is a motive that speaks loudly. Let us hear what Monsieur Lang has to say about his rival, and about a certain theft. They stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under their feet. Victor Lang, a wiry man with oil-stained hands and narrow eyes, looked up from a clock he was dismantling. His face hardened at the sight of them. "What do you want?" he snapped, setting down a screwdriver with a clatter. "I'm busy," Monsieur Lang Poirot said, his voice calm but firm. "I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek the truth. You knew Monsieur Gideon Wells, the clockmaker who has vanished, and Monsieur Thomas Carver, who lies dead. I wish to know your part in this affair." Lang's eyes narrowed further, his hands clenching. "My part? I've got nothing to do with it. Wells ran off, probably with someone's money, and Carver, he got what he deserved. Cheated half the village, including me." Poirot's eyebrows rose, his smile polite but sharp. "Cheated, you say? Tell me more, monsieur." Lang leaned back, wiping his hands on a rag. "Carver sold me a clock last year, said it was a rare piece. Paid a fortune for it. Turned out to be junk gears all wrong, case of fake. He laughed when I confronted him. Said I should have known better. Most interesting," Poirot said, his fingers tapping his chin. "And this made you angry, Nan? Angry enough to wish him harm?" Lang's face reddened. "I hated him, sure, but I didn't kill him. You think I'd risk my neck for that crook?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps not, but let us speak of another matter. The theft at Monsieur Wells' shop rare gears, stolen 2 nights before his disappearance. The police suspect you, Monsieur Lang. What do you say to that?" Lang's hands froze on the rag, his jaw tight. I took the gears, all right. Wells had everything, clients, reputation, all. The best materials. I needed those gears for a job, and he wouldn't sell. So I broke in, but that's all I did. I wasn't there when he vanished, and I didn't touch Carver." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "A thief, then, but not a killer. We shall see. Where were you, monsieur, the night Monsieur Carver was murdered?" Lang shifted, his eyes darting to the side. "At the pub, the Red Lion. Ask anyone. I was there till midnight." "A convenient alibi," Poirot said, "but one that must be checked. And Monsieur Wells' disappearance. Did you see him that day?" Lang shook his head, too quickly. "No. He was always locked in his shop, working on some big project. Wouldn't talk to me. Kept muttering about a special client, someone important." Poirot's mustache twitched. "A special client. Did he name this client?" "No," Lang said, his voice low, but he was scared. Kept checking the windows, like someone was after him. "Most interesting," Poirot said. "Merci, Monsieur Lang. You have given me much to think about." As they left the shop, Eleanor whispered, "He's lying, isn't he, about the pub?" Poirot nodded. His eyes, mademoiselle, they betray him. The alibi is weak, and his anger is deep. But is it deep enough to kill? That is the question. They returned to Wells' shop, the familiar tick of clocks greeting them like an old friend. Poirot opened the coded ledger, its pages a maze of numbers and symbols. Eleanor pointed to a new entry they'd missed. Holt, 200, rare part, 413. "Dr. Holt," she said, her voice surprised. "Why would he buy something from Mr. Wells?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. A physician buying a rare clock part. Most curious. The ledger, it speaks of secrets, and Dr. Holt, I think, knows more. Then he tells. As evening fell, the shop grew darker, the shadows pooling in the corners. Poirot and Eleanor pored over the ledger, finding more references to the Star Diamond and the mysterious 413. A noise outside a sharp crack. like a stick breaking made Eleanor jump. "What was that?" she whispered. Poirot moved to the window, his hand on the brass gear in his pocket. "Someone watches us, mademoiselle. The truth draws near, and it brings danger." He stepped outside, his eyes scanning the alley. A figure darted behind a wall, too quick to see clearly. Poirot gave chase, his polished shoes slipping on the cobblestones. But the figure was gone, leaving only a faint scent of perfume Clara. Beaumont's perfume, he was sure. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "The widow, she is bolder than I thought." Back in the shop, Poirot turned to Eleanor. "We must be careful, mademoiselle. The star diamond, the silent chime, the 4:13 day are pieces of a puzzle, and someone does not want us to solve it." Chapter 9. The Doctor's Secret. Hercule Poirot walked through Thornwick's winding streets, the morning sun casting long shadows across the cobblestones. The village was restless, its usual calm shattered by whispers of murder and mystery. Shop doors creaked open cautiously, and villagers glanced over their shoulders, as if expecting danger to slip from the shadows. The church bell tolled softly, a reminder of time ticking forward. But Poirot's mind was fixed on a time that stood still, 4:13. The silver pocket watch in Gideon Well's shop, the smashed clock at Thomas Carver's murder scene, and now a new clue, a gear etched with those same numbers pointed to a secret buried deep in Thornwick's heart. Poirot's neat moustache twitched, his little grey cells humming with the puzzle. Eleanor Price walked beside him, her scarf loose round her shoulders, her brown eyes sharp despite the worry etched on her face. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "why are we going to Dr. Holt's? Do you think he's part of this?" Poirot adjusted his silk-banded hat, his steps precise. "Mademoiselle, the ledger tells us Dr. Holt bought a rare clock part from Monsieur Wells, an unusual purchase for a physician. And where there is an unusual purchase, there is often an unusual motive. We must learn what he hides." They reached Dr. Simon Holt's house, a tidy cottage near the church with ivy climbing its walls. The garden was neat, with herbs in orderly rows, but the air felt heavy, as if the house itself held its breath. Holt opened the door, his thin frame stooped, his glasses slipping down his nose. His hands fidgeted, betraying nerves beneath his calm smile. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Price," he said, his voice unsteady. "What brings you here?" "Bonjour, Monsieur le Docteur," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I seek answers about Monsieur Wells and Monsieur Carver. You knew them both, Nan." Holt led them to a small study, its shelves lined with medical books and bottles of tinctures. A clock ticked on his desk, one of Wells' designs, its face simple but elegant. Poirot's eyes locked onto it, noting its hands moving smoothly, not stopped at 4:13. "A fine clock," he said. "Monsieur Wells' work, I presume?" Holt nodded, adjusting his glasses. "Yes, I bought it last year. Gideon was a genius." With clocks, Poirot's smile was polite but sharp. "And not just clocks, I think. The ledger in his shop mentions a purchase you made, a rare clock part, expensive and unusual. Why would a doctor need such a thing?" Holt's hands froze, his eyes darting to the side. I was curious. I dabble in mechanics, a hobby. I asked Gideon for a part to experiment with, nothing more." Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "A hobby, you say? Yet the ledger lists this part beside the name star. Diamond, a curious hobby, Nan, that involves a jewel worth a fortune." Holt's face paled, his fingers trembling. I don't know anything about a diamond. Gideon never mentioned it. You're mistaken. Poirot's eyes flicked to Holt's vest, where a chain dangled from a pocket. May I see your pocket watch? Monsieur. Holt hesitated, then pulled it out a silver watch, engraved with GW. Its hands stopped at 4:13. It's broken, he said quickly. Hasn't worked in weeks. Poirot's mustache twitched. Broken, yet set to 4:13, like the watch in the shop, the clock at Carver's house. A coincidence, perhaps. Holt shoved the watch back into his pocket, his voice rising. I told you, it's broken. I don't know anything about this Diamond or Wells disappearance. Before Poirot could press further, heavy boots stomped. Outside, Inspector Hardy burst in, his face grim. Poirot, Miss Price, we've got trouble. We found a blood-stained tool in Lang's Shapper Clockmaker's chisel, matches the kind used to kill Carver. I've arrested him, Eleanor gasped. Mr. Lang. But he said he was at the pub. Hardy snorted. His alibi is shaky. Half the pub says he left early. He's our man, mark my words. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A chisel, you say? Found where anyone could see it. Nan, Inspector, this is too convenient. A killer does not leave such clues unless he wishes them to be found. Hardy crossed his arms. You're saying it's a plant? Who'd do that? Poirot's smile was thin. Someone who wishes us to look at Monsieur Lang and not at them. Tell me, where was this chisel found? In a drawer, Hardy said. Not even hidden properly. Precisement, Poirot said. A true killer hides his tools, not displays. Then we must look elsewhere, Inspector. Back at Wells' shop, Poirot opened the coded ledger, its pages a maze of secrets. Eleanor pointed to another entry. Holt, payment, confidential, for 13. What does it mean? She asked. Poirot's fingers traced the words. It means, mademoiselle, that Dr. Holt is deeper in this than he admits. A doctor, a clockpart, a stopped watch all tied to the star diamond. But why? As night fell, the shop grew quiet, the clocks ticking a steady hum. Poirot pored over a sketch of the star-patterned clock, its notes mentioning a silent chime. A sudden noise, rattle at the back door made Eleanor jump. It's happening again, she whispered. Poirot moved swiftly, his hand on the brass gear in his pocket. He flung open the door, but the alley was empty. Only a faint whiff of perfume, lingering Clara Beaumont's scent, unmistakable. The widow again, he murmured. She is bold, but careless. He turned to Eleanor, his voice low. We are close, mademoiselle. The diamond, the chime, the time they point to a truth someone will kill to hide. We must be ready. Chapter 10. The Silent Chime. Hercule Poirot sat in the dim light of his temporary lodgings in Thornwick, a modest room above the village in that smelled faintly of polished wood and stale ale. The flickering glow of a single candle illuminated. The coded ledger spread open on the table before him, its pages a labyrinth of numbers and cryptic shorthand. The pocket watch, stopped at 4:13, lay beside it, its face glinting like an unblinking eye. Outside, the wind howled through the narrow streets, rattling the window panes and carrying the distant chime of a church clock striking midnight. Poirot's mind, however, was far from restful. The words of the mysterious note, "Seek the silent chime," echoed in his thoughts. A riddle wrapped in the enigma of Gideon Wells' disappearance and Thomas Carver's murder. The little grey cells, as Poirot so often called them, were at work, piecing together the fragments of the case. The ledger, painstakingly decoded with Miss Eleanor Price's assistance, had revealed transactions that hinted at a secret beyond mere clockmaking, secret valuable enough to kill for. The gear, engraved with 413, delivered by the local boy, had deepened the mystery, suggesting Wells was not only alive, but actively leaving clues. And now, the phrase silent chime tugged at Poirot's intuition, a thread he was determined to unravel. He rose from his chair, adjusting his meticulously pressed waistcoat, and paced the room with measured steps. "The silent chime," he murmured, his Belgian accent softening the edges of the words. "A chime that does not sound, yet speaks. Mon Dieu, what does it mean?" His eyes darted to the pocket watch, its hands frozen at 4:13, a time that appeared again and again on the watch, on the broken clock in Carver's study, and now etched into the gear. It was no coincidence. Poirot did not believe in coincidences. The ledger, too, held secrets yet to be fully uncovered. Miss Price had deciphered entries pointing to Ashford's folly, a clock commissioned by Lord Reginald Ashford, and a transaction involving Dr. Simon Holt, the village physician. But the ledger's final pages remained stubbornly opaque, their code more complex than the rest. Poirot suspected they held the key to Wells' whereabouts and the motive behind Carver's murder. The sharpened clock hand used to kill Carver, a tool of Wells' own design, suggested a connection too precise to ignore. Yet Inspector Hardy's theory that Wells had murdered Carver and fled felt too simplistic, too clumsy for the intricate puzzle Poirot was assembling. He paused by the window, gazing out at the darkened village. Thornwick was a place of secrets, its quaint facade hiding greed, betrayal, and perhaps something more sinister. The suspects Lord Ashford, Clara Beaumont, Victor Lang, and Dr. Holtich had motives that tangled like the gears of Wells. Clocks, Ashford's wealth and obsession with timepieces, Clara's rumoured affair with Carver, Lang's jealousy, Holt's nervous demeanour, were pieces of a mechanism that Poirot had yet to fully understand. And then there was Miss Price, the apprentice, whose loyalty to Wells seemed genuine, but whose knowledge of the workshop's secrets made her a figure of interest. Poirot returned to the table and picked up the gear, turning it over in his hands. The engraving of 413 was meticulous, the work of a craftsman who valued precision. "Seek the silent chime," he repeated, his mind racing. A chime was a sound, a bell's call, yet this one was silent. A contradiction, or perhaps a metaphor. His thoughts drifted to Wells' workshop, a place of ticking clocks and worry mechanisms, yet one where silence could hide the truth. He resolved to return there at first light, certain that the answer lay within its walls. The next morning, Poirot descended the creaking stairs of the inn, his polished shoes clicking against the wood. The innkeeper, a stout woman named Mrs. Glover, greeted him with a nod and a steaming cup of tea. "Early start, Mr. Poirot?" she asked, her eyes curious. "Oui, madame," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "The early hour is the friend of clarity, and I have much to clarify today." Outside, the village was waking, its cobblestone streets bathed in the pale light of dawn. Poirot made his way to Wells' workshop, a squat stone building at the edge of Thornwick's main square. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew and wood smoke. As he approached, he noticed the door slightly ajar, a detail that set his nerves on edge. He pushed it open, his hand resting lightly on the silver-topped cane he carried more for elegance than necessity. The workshop was as he had left it, a chaos of gears, springs, and half-assembled clocks, their faces staring like silent witnesses. The pocket watch still lay on Wells' desk, its hands unmoved. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. His gaze settled on a large grandfather clock in the corner, its pendulum still, its face dark. Unlike the other clocks, it emitted no sound, no tick to mark the passage of time. A silent chime. He approached the clock, his fingers tracing its ornate carvings. The wood was polished to a sheen, but its silence was unnatural in a room filled with the heartbeat of ticking mechanisms. Poirot tapped the clock's casing, listening for a hollow sound, a clue to a hidden compartment. Nothing. He opened the glass door, inspecting the pendulum and weights. Still nothing. Frustration crept in, but Poirot pushed it aside. Patience, Hercule, he chided himself. The truth reveals itself to those who observe. He stepped back, considering the note's words again. Seek the silent chime. A chime was not just a sound, but a mechanism, a bell, a striker, a component within a clock. He turned his attention to the smaller clocks on the shelves, examining, each for a bell or chime mechanism. Most were simple timekeepers, but one, a delicate mantle clock with a brass bell, caught his eye. Its striker was disengaged, rendering the chime silent. Poirot lifted the clock carefully, its weight heavier than expected. He turned it over, inspecting the base. A faint seam suggested a hidden panel. With a gentle press, the panel clicked open, revealing a small drawer. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, and a tiny brass key. Poirot's heart quickened. He unfolded the paper, revealing a letter in Wells' precise handwriting, addressed to Miss Price. "My dear Eleanor," it began, "if you find this, I am in grave danger. The truth I guard is worth more than gold, and there are those who would kill to possess it. The guardian of time has betrayed me, and I fear for my life. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. The silent chime holds the key. Yours, Gideon." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The guardian of time," he murmured. The phrase was cryptic, but it suggested someone in Wells' circles, someone trusted, perhaps one of the suspects. The key, small and intricately designed, was unlike any he had seen in the workshop. It was not for a clock, but for something smaller, more personal. A lockbox, perhaps, or another hidden compartment. He slipped the letter and key into his pocket, his mind racing. The letter confirmed Wells was alive, or had been when he wrote it, and that he was hiding from a specific threat. The guardian of time could be Lord Ashford, with his collection of clocks, or perhaps Dr. Holt, whose pocket watch was stopped at 4:13. Even Clara Beaumont or Victor Lang could fit the description, each tied to Wells' world of timepieces. But the silent chime had yielded its secret, and Poirot felt he was closer to the truth. He spent the next hour combing the workshop, searching for a lock that matched the key. Every drawer, every cabinet, every clock was inspected with meticulous care. The workshop was a maze of possibilities, but the key fit none of them. Frustrated but undeterred, Poirot sat at Wells' desk, his fingers drumming lightly on the ledger. The answer was here, he was certain, hidden in plain sight. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Miss Price stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Mr. Poirot, I came as soon as I could," she said, her voice trembling. "I heard about the break-in attempt last night. Are you all right?" "Oui," Mademoiselle Poirot replied, rising to greet her. "I am unharmed, but the workshop holds more secrets than I anticipated. Tell me, have you ever heard Mr. Wells speak of a guardian of time?" Miss Price frowned, her brow furrowing. "No, never. but he was always so secretive about his special commissions. He'd lock himself in here for hours, working on something he wouldn't let me see. I thought it was just his way, but now, her voice trailed off, and she glanced nervously at the workshop's shadows. Poirot showed her the letter, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened as she read, and her hand flew to her mouth. "He's alive," she whispered. "Oh, thank God. But who is this guardian, and why would they betray him?" "That, mademoiselle, is what we must discover," Poirot said. "The silent chime has spoken, but its message is incomplete. This key," he held up the brass key, catching the light, "is our next clue. Do you know of any lock it might fit?" Miss Price shook her head. "I've never seen it before, but Mr. Wells had a habit of hiding things. He once showed me a trick with one of his clocks, a secret compartment you'd never find unless you knew where to look." "Show me," Poirot said, his voice sharp with anticipation. She led him to a small wall clock, its face adorned with Roman numerals. "This one," she said, lifting it from the shelf. "He showed me how to open it once, but I never saw what was inside." Poirot watched as she pressed a hidden catch beneath the clock's base. A panel slid open, revealing a small compartment, but it was empty. The lock, however, matched the key in Poirot's hand. He inserted it, turning it gently. The mechanism clicked, and a second panel opened, revealing another note. This one was shorter, written in haste. "The truth is in the tower." 413, the tower, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The church clock tower. Perhaps it is the only tower in Thornwick, Nan." Miss Price nodded. "It's old, and Mr. Wells used to maintain the clock there. He said it was one of his proudest works." "Then we must go there at once," Poirot said, pocketing the note. "But we must be cautious. The guardian of time is watching, and they will not hesitate to act if they feel threatened." The church stood at the edge of the village, its stone walls weathered by centuries of wind and rain. The clock tower loomed above, its face visible from nearly every corner of Thornwick. Poirot and Miss Price approached cautiously, the morning mist clinging to the ground like a shroud. The church door was unlocked, and they stepped inside, the air cool and heavy with the scent of wax and old wood. The tower's staircase was narrow and winding, its steps worn smooth by generations of feet. Poirot climbed slowly, his cane tapping against the stone. At the top, they found the clock mechanism, a marvel of gears and levers, its hands pointing to 413. Poirot's heart quickened. "Another clue," he said, examining the mechanism. A small brass plate was etched with the same time, and beside it was a tiny lock. He inserted the key, and the plate swung open, revealing a final note. "The guardian is closer than you think," it read. "The diamond shines at 413, but only the silent will see it." Poirot's mind raced. The star diamond, mentioned by Clara Beaumont, was the key to the mystery. Wells had hidden it, perhaps in the church clock itself, and the time for 13 was its marker. But the guardian, who was it? The answer was tantalizingly close, yet still out of reach. As they descended the tower, Poirot's thoughts turned to the suspects: Lord Ashford's wealth, Clara's greed, Lang's jealousy. Holt's secret seach could be the guardian. Each could have betrayed Wells, but the letter's warning to trust no one lingered, and Poirot knew he had to tread carefully. The silent chime had revealed its secret, but the truth was still ticking. Waiting to be uncovered, he decided to set a trap. If the guardian was watching, they would act to protect their secret. Poirot would announce that he had decoded the ledgers, final pages, and would reveal the killer at Wells' workshop that night. The true culprit, he was certain, would be unable to resist the bait, as he and Miss Price stepped out into the village square. The church clock struck noon, its chime echoing through the mist. Poirot smiled faintly. "The silent chime has spoken," he said, "and now the truth will follow." The rest of the day was spent preparing. Poirot met with Inspector Hardy, informing him of the plan to gather the suspects at the workshop. Hardy, skeptical but intrigued, agreed to provide constables to guard the premises. Poirot then visited each suspect, dropping hints about the ledger's secrets without revealing too much. To Lord Ashford, he mentioned a breakthrough in the case. To Clara Beaumont, he spoke of a hidden treasure. To Victor Lang, he hinted at evidence clearing his name. To Dr. Holt, he suggested a connection to the mysterious clock part. Each reacted with a mix of curiosity and unease, and Poirot noted their expressions carefully. As evening fell, the workshop was prepared. The clocks ticked in unison there. Rhythm a stark contrast to the silent chime Poirot had uncovered. Miss Price stood by his side, her face pale but resolute. The suspects arrived one by one, their footsteps echoing in the quiet. Lord Ashford, impeccably dressed, carried an air of authority. Clara Beaumont, her eyes sharp, adjusted her gloves nervously. Victor Lang, sullen and defensive, avoided Poirot's gaze. Dr. Holt, his hands trembling slightly, clutched his medical bag. Poirot stood before them, the ledger in his hands. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice steady, "tonight we uncover the truth. The ledger of Monsieur Wells has revealed its secrets, and with it, the identity of the one who sought to silence Haymand, who killed Thomas Carver." The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clocks. Poirot's eyes moved from one suspect to another, watching for the slightest tell. The trap was set, and the guardian of time, whoever they were, would soon reveal themselves. The silent chime had done its work, and now the final hour was approaching. Chapter 11. The trap. The air in Gideon Wells' workshop was thick with tension. The rhythmic ticking of countless clocks forming a chorus that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the village itself. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the chaotic array of gears, pendulums, and half-finished timepieces surrounding him. The flickering light of oil lamps cast long shadows across the faces of the assembled suspects. Lord Reginald Ashford, Clara Beaumont, Victor Lang, and Dr. Simon Holtitch, seated on a mismatched chair arranged in a semicircle before him. Miss Eleanor Price stood to his left, her expression a mixture of resolve and apprehension, while Inspector Hardy lingered near the door, his burly frame flanked by two constables whose eyes darted nervously about the room. Poirot held the coded ledger. Aloft, its worn leather cover gleaming faintly under the lamplight. "Madame et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, cutting through the ticking like a blade. "Tonight, we stand on the precipice of truth. The disappearance of Monsieur Gideon Wells, the murder of Monsieur Thomas Carver, and the secrets hidden within this ledger are threads of a single tapestry woven with greed, betrayal, and the relentless march of time. I, Hercule Poirot, have decoded the final pages of this ledger, and they reveal not only the motive for these crimes, but the identity of the one who sought to silence the truth." A murmur rippled through the group. Lord Ashford adjusted his monocle, his aristocratic features betraying a flicker of unease. Clara Beaumont's gloved hands tightened in her lap, her lips pressed into a thin line. Victor Lang shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the floor, while Dr. Holt's fingers twitched around the handle of his medical bag, his face pale. Poirot noted each reaction, his keen eyes missing nothing. The trap was set, and he was certain the guilty party would soon betray themselves. Before we proceed, Poirot continued, pacing slowly before the group, his silver-topped cane tapping lightly against the wooden floor. Let us review the facts, Nan. Monsieur Wells, the esteemed clockmaker, vanished from Thornwick, leaving behind a pocket watch stopped at 4:13 and a note. The truth ticks in silence. A theft of rare clock parts was reported, and soon after, Monsieur Carver, a wealthy antiques dealer, was found dead, stabbed with a sharpened clock hand from Wells' own design. A clock in his study, also stopped at 4:13, mirrored the watch, and then a gear engraved with the same time, accompanied by the words, "Seek the silent chime," was delivered to me. These are not coincidences, mes amis. They are the deliberate strokes of a master craftsman, leading us to the heart of this mystery. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The clocks ticked on, their rhythm a constant reminder of the puzzle's core time itself. Poirot turned to the desk where the pocket watch lay, its hands frozen at 4:13. This time, 4:13 is the key, he said, lifting the watch for all to see. It appears again and again, a signature of intent. And the silent chime, which I discovered this morning, has revealed its secret. A letter from Monsieur Wells, warning of a guardian of time who betrayed him. This guardian, I believe, is among us now. A gasp escaped Miss Price, and Clara Beaumont's eyes narrowed. Lord Ashford cleared his throat, his voice steady but strained. Mr. Poirot, this is all very theatrical, but what exactly are you suggesting? That one of us is responsible for Wells' disappearance and Carver's death? Precisement, my lord, Poirot replied, his moustache twitching slightly. But let us not be hasty. The truth, like a fine clock, requires precision to function. Let us examine each of you in turn, and the ledger will guide us. He opened the ledger, its pages marked with Miss Price's careful annotations. The ledger reveals transactions not recorded in Wells' public accounts, purchases of rare components, commissions for unique clocks. One entry, Ashford's Folly, points to a clock commissioned by you, Lord Ashford, a clock with a hidden mechanism, perhaps to conceal something of great value. Tell me, my lord, what was the purpose of this clock? Ashford's face reddened, but he maintained his composure. I commissioned a clock, yes, as I have done many times. Wells was a genius, and I admired his work. But I know nothing of his disappearance, or this so-called guardian. Your accusations are baseless, Poirot. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but his eyes gleamed with calculation. He turned to Clara Beaumont. Madame Beaumont, you were close to Monsieur Carver, were you not? An affair, perhaps, as the village whispers suggest. And yet, you told me Carver was obsessed with a rare gem, the Star Diamond. Did you know he sought to acquire it from Wells, perhaps by force? Clara's laugh was sharp, almost brittle. Thomas was a fool for shiny things, Mr. Poirot, but I had no part in his schemes. If he crossed Wells, that was his mistake, not mine. I know nothing of diamonds or clocks. Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor Lang, whose hands were clenched into fists. Monsieur Lang, your rivalry with Wells is no secret. You admitted to stealing clock parts from his workshop, driven by jealousy. But was it only parts you took, or did you seek something more, something worth killing for? Lang's eyes flashed with anger. I stole a few gears, yes, to see how he did it, but murder, that's nonsense. I was at the pub the night Carver died. Ask anyone there? You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Finally, Poirot turned to Dr. Holt, whose nervous demeanour had not gone unnoticed. Doctor, you purchased an expensive clock component from Wells, one not listed in his usual inventory, and your pocket watch, a Wells original, is stopped at 4:13. A curious coincidence. Nan, what secret do you hide? Holt's hands trembled, and he stammered. I bought the part for an experiment, nothing more. My watch is broken, that's all. I swear I had nothing to do with Carver's death or Wells' disappearance. Poirot stepped back, surveying the group. Each of you has a connection to Wells, to Carver, to the secret of the Star Diamond. But only one of you is the guardian of time, the one who betrayed Wells and killed Carver to protect their own interests. Tonight, I will reveal that person. He moved to the mantel clock, the one that had hidden the silent chime's secret. Drawer. This clock, he said, contained a letter and a key, leading me to the church clock tower, where another note spoke of the diamond shining at 4:13. The Star Diamond, Mies Amos, is the heart of this mystery. Wells hid it, and someone in this room wanted it badly enough to kill. The room grew deathly still, the ticking clocks the only sound. Poirot's eyes locked onto Dr. Holt, whose face had drained of colour. Dr. Poirot said softly, You have been most uneasy this evening. Let us test a theory, shall we? He crossed to the workshop's door, where a constable stood guard, and whispered a brief instruction. The constable nodded and stepped outside. Poirot returned to the centre of the room, his voice rising. I have asked the constable to fetch a certain item from the church, tower clock component that I believe holds the Star Diamond itself. When it arrives, the truth will be undeniable. Holt's eyes widened, and he lurched to his feet, his medical bag slipping to the floor. You don't understand, he stammered, his voice cracking. It's not what you think. Before anyone could react, Holt bolted for the door, shoving past the second constable. Poirot shouted, Aratisla, but Holt was already through the doorway, his footsteps echoing in the night. Inspector Hardy sprang into action, barking orders to the constables, who gave chase. The room erupted in chaos. Clara gasped. Lang swore under his breath, and Ashford stood, his monocle falling to the floor. Poirot remained calm, turning to Miss Price. Mademoiselle, stay here with the others. I must assist the inspector. He hurried out, his cane tapping rapidly as he followed the sound of running feet. The village square was dark, lit only by the faint glow of street lamps and the moon's pale light. Holt's figure was visible ahead, sprinting toward the church. Hardy and the constables were close behind, their shouts cutting through the night. Poirot, though not as swift, followed with determination, his mind racing. Holt's reaction had confirmed his suspicions. The doctor was involved, but was he the killer, or merely a pawn? As they reached the church, Holt darted inside, slamming the door behind him. Hardy forced it open, and Poirot entered to find the doctor scrambling up the tower stairs. The constables followed, their heavy boots pounding against the stone. Poirot climbed more slowly, his breath steady despite the exertion. At the top, they found Holt cornered near the clock mechanism, his hands raised in surrender. Please. Holt gasped, sweat beading on his forehead. I didn't kill Carver. I was working with him, yes, to get the diamond, but I didn't kill him. Then why run, monsieur? Poirot asked, his voice calm but piercing. "What do you fear?" Holt's eyes darted to the clock. Its hands still at 4:13. "It's not me you want," he said, his voice hoarse. It's a sharp crack split the air, and Holt staggered, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers as he collapsed against the clock mechanism. Poirot spun around, scanning the shadows of the tower, but the shooter was gone, their footsteps fading down the stairs. Hardy shouted for the constables to pursue, but Poirot knelt beside Holt, pressing a handkerchief to the wound. "Speak, Monsieur," Poirot urged. "Who is the guardian of time? Who shot you?" Holt's eyes fluttered, his voice weak. "The diamond. It's in the clock. But the guardian, they'll kill again." His words trailed off as he lost consciousness. Poirot stood, his mind racing. The trap had worked, but not as he had planned. Holt was involved, but he was not the mastermind. The true guardian of time was still at large, and the star diamond, hidden in the church clock, was the prize they sought. The night was far from over, and Poirot knew he had to act swiftly to unmask the killer before they struck again. Chapter 12. The clockmaker's return. The church tower loomed over Thornwick, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. The clock face frozen at 4:13, as if time itself had paused to witness the unfolding drama. Hercule Poirot stood at the base of the tower, his breath visible in the chilly night air, his mind a whirl of calculations. The gunshot that had wounded Dr. Simon Holt still echoed in his memory, a sharp reminder that the guardian of time, the true orchestrator of Gideon, Wells' disappearance and Thomas Carver's murder, was still at large. The constables had scoured the village square for the shooter, but the shadows had swallowed them whole. Inspector Hardy, his face grim, had sent for a doctor to tend to Holt, who lay unconscious in the church vestry, his shoulder wounds, but his secret still locked within. Poirot's silver-topped cane tapped against the cobblestones as he paced, his eyes fixed on the tower. The note found in the clock mechanism, "The diamond shines at 4:13." But only the silent will see it had confirmed his suspicion. The star diamond, the elusive gem at the heart of this mystery, was hidden within the church clock. But desperate flight and the shooter's attack suggested a deeper conspiracy, one that Wells himself might hold the key to unraveling. The clockmaker's letter, warning of a guardian of time who had betrayed him, pointed to a traitor among the suspects, but Holt's confession had muddied the waters. He had admitted to conspiring with Carver to steal the diamond, but denied the murder. If Holt was not the killer, then who had wielded the sharpened clock hand, and who had fired the shot in the tower? Poirot's thoughts returned to the ledger, its final pages still partially undecoded. Miss Eleanor Price, Wells' apprentice, had made progress, but the most critical entries, those hinting at the diamond's hiding place and the identity of the guardian, remained elusive. The time for 13, etched into gears and frozen on clocks, was no mere coincidence. It was a deliberate clue, a message from Wells. Poirot was certain the clockmaker was alive, orchestrating events from the shadows to expose the truth. The question was where and how to find him. He turned to Inspector Hardy, who was barking orders to a constable. "Inspector, we must secure the church tower. The diamond is there, and I believe Monsieur Wells is not far. We must act swiftly before the guardian strikes again." Hardy nodded, his skepticism tempered by the night's events. "I'll post men at every entrance. But Poirot, if Wells is alive, why hasn't he shown himself? And who's this guardian?" "He's so afraid of that, mon ami, is what we shall discover," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with determination. The silent chime has spoken, and now we must listen to the clockmaker himself. Poirot re-entered the church, the air heavy with the scent of old stone and candle wax. The vestry was a small, cluttered room where a local physician was tending to Holt. The doctor, a wiry man named Dr. Grayson, looked up as Poirot approached. "He'll live," Grayson said, tying off a bandage. "The bullet missed anything vital, but he's lost blood. He won't be talking for a while." "Mercy," Dr. Poirot said, his eyes lingering on Holt's pale face. "But his silence speaks volumes. He knows more than he is told, and I suspect he fears the true culprit." Leaving the vestry, Poirot climbed the tower stairs once more, his steps deliberate despite the ache in his legs. The clock mechanism was a marvel of engineering, its gears gleaming in the dim light of a lantern Hardy had left behind. Poirot examined the brass plate where he had found the final note, his fingers tracing the lock that had yielded to the key. The note's words, "The diamond shines at 4:13, but only the silent will see it," suggested a hidden compartment within the clock itself. He tapped the gears, listening for a hollow sound, but the mechanism was solid, its secrets well-guarded. As he worked, a faint creak echoed from the shadows below. Poirot froze, his hand tightening on his cane. "Who is there?" he called, his voice sharp. No answer came, but the air felt charged, as if the tower itself were holding its breath. He descended a few steps, peering into the darkness, but saw nothing. Yet his instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, told him he was not alone. Returning to the mechanism, Poirot focused on the clock face. The hands, frozen at 4:13, were larger than those of any clock in Wells' workshop, their weight balanced by a complex system of counterweights. He climbed a narrow ladder to inspect the face from behind, his fingers brushing against the cold metal. A faint seam, nearly invisible, ran along the edge of the numeral 4. He pressed it, and with a soft click, a panel slid open, revealing a small cavity. Inside was not the diamond, but another note, this one scrawled in haste. "The truth is in the pendulum's heart. Find me where time stands still." Poirot's heart quickened. The pendulum. He descended to the base of the mechanism, where the pendulum hung motionless, its heavy brass bob glinting in the lantern light. He examined it closely, noting a faint seam around its edge. With careful pressure, the bob split open, revealing the diamond but a tiny brass cylinder, no larger than a thimble. Inside was a tightly rolled slip of paper, bearing a single line. "Meet me at the old mill, midnight. G.W. Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "The clockmaker returns." He pocketed the cylinder and descended the tower, his mind racing. The old mill, on the outskirts of Thornwick, was a derelict structure, its wheel long stilled by a dried-up stream. It was a fitting place for Wells to hide a place where time, in a sense, stood still. But the meeting was hours away, and Poirot knew the Guardian would be watching. He needed to prepare to ensure the trap he had set in the workshop would ensnare the true culprit. Back in the village, Poirot found Miss Price at the inn, her face pale but resolute. "Mademoiselle," he said, drawing her aside, "I have found a message from Monsieur Wells. He is alive and wishes to meet me tonight, but we must be cautious. The Guardian of Time is desperate, and they will stop at nothing to protect their secret." Miss Price's eyes widened. "He's alive." "Oh, Mr. Poirot, where is he?" "At the old mill, at midnight," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But you must tell no one, not even Inspector Hardy. Trust is a luxury we cannot afford. She nodded, her hands trembling. What can I do to help? Return to the workshop, Poirot said. Continue decoding the ledger. The final pages may hold the key to the Guardian's identity. And mademoiselle, be vigilant. The Guardian may suspect you no more than you do. As Miss Price hurried off, Poirot sought out Hardy, who was coordinating with the constables. Inspector, I have a lead on Wells' whereabouts. I will need your men to surround the old mill tonight, but they must remain hidden. We cannot risk alerting the Guardian. Hardy frowned. The mill, that place, is a ruin. You're sure about this, Poirot? As sure as the ticking of a clock, Poirot replied. But we must move with precision. The Guardian is cunning, and they have already struck once tonight. The hours until midnight passed in a blur of preparation. Poirot returned to his lodgings, reviewing the ledger's decoded entries. The mention of Ashford's folly and Holt's purchase of a rare component suggested a conspiracy tied to the Star Diamond. But the Guardian's identity remained elusive. Lord Ashford's wealth, Clara Beaumont's greed, Victor Lang's jealousy, and Holt's fear all pointed to possible motives, but none fit perfectly. The Guardian was someone close to Wells. Someone trusted someone who had betrayed him. As the church clock struck 11, Poirot donned his overcoat and hat, his cane tucked under his arm. The village was quiet, its streets shrouded in mist. He made his way to the old mill, a crumbling structure of stone and rotting wood, its wheels silent against the dry stream. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Poirot's senses were on edge, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. He positioned himself behind a crumbling wall, his eyes scanning the darkness. Hardy's constables, true to their word, were invisible, their presence marked only by the occasional glint of a lantern. Poirot checked his watch. 11:45. The moment of truth was approaching at precisely midnight. A figure emerged from the shadows, moving with the cautious grace of a man accustomed to precision. Gideon Wells. His face was haggard, his clothes worn, but his eyes burned with determination. He carried a small lantern, its light casting eerie shadows across the mill's ruins. "Monsieur Wells," Poirot called softly, stepping into view. "It is I, Hercule Poirot. You have led me on quite a chase, mon ami." Wells froze, his hand tightening on the lantern. "Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "you found my notes. I knew you would." "Oui," Poirot said, approaching slowly, "but we have little time. The Guardian of Time is near, and they have already tried to." "Silence, Dr. Holt. Tell me, who betrayed you, and where is the Star Diamond?" Wells' eyes darted to the shadows, his voice barely a whisper. "The diamond is safe, hidden in the church clock's pendulum. I crafted a compartment no one would find. Lord Ashford entrusted it to me, to keep it from thieves like Carver and Holt. They were working together, planning to steal it, but I never thought it would come to murder. And the Guardian," Poirot pressed, "who is it?" Before Wells could answer, a twig snapped nearby. Poirot spun around, his cane raised, but the darkness revealed nothing. Wells grabbed his arm. "They're here," he whispered. "We must move." They ducked into the mill, its interior a maze of broken beams and rusted machinery. Wells led Poirot to a corner where a trapdoor lay hidden beneath a pile of debris. "I've been hiding here," he said, lifting the trapdoor to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "The diamond was my responsibility, but someone close to Ashford betrayed me. They knew about the clock, about the diamond's hiding place. As they descended, Poirot's mind raced. The guardian was someone with intimate knowledge of Wells' work, someone who had manipulated events to their advantage. Clara Beaumont's connection to Carver, Lang's rivalry, Ashford's wealth, all were possibilities, but none felt complete. The truth was tantalizingly close, yet still out of reach. At the bottom of the stairs, Wells lit a second lantern, revealing a small chamber filled with clockmaking tools and papers. "I've been watching," Wells said, leaving clues to draw out the guardian. "I knew Carver's death wasn't my doing, but I had to disappear to protect the diamond." Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the chamber. "You have been clever, monsieur, but we must end this tonight. The guardian will come for you, and for the diamond. We must be ready." They devised a plan. Wells would remain in the chamber, while Poirot returned to the surface, signaling Hardy's men to close in. If the guardian appeared, they would be caught in the act. Poirot climbed back to the mill, his heart pounding with anticipation. The night was silent, save for the distant hoot of an owl as he stepped into the open. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a hooded cloak. "Poirot," a voice hissed, low and menacing. "You should have left well enough alone." Before Poirot could respond, the figure raised a pistol. A shot rang out, but it was not from the cloaked figure. One of Hardy's constables, hidden nearby, had fired, striking the figure's arm. The pistol clattered to the ground, and the figures stumbled, their hood falling back to reveal Clara Beaumont. "Madame," Poirot said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You are the guardian of time, are you not?" Clara's eyes blazed with defiance, but she clutched her wounded arm, unable to flee. Hardy's men surrounded her, their lanterns illuminating her pale face. "You have no proof," she spat. "This is madness." But Poirot's trap had worked. Wells emerged from the trapdoor, his lantern casting light on Clara's face. "It was you," he said, his voice heavy with betrayal. "You were Ashford's confidant, the one who knew about the diamond. You told Carver, didn't you?" Clara's silence was answer enough. Poirot stepped forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Madame, you manipulated Holt, framed Lang, and killed Carver when he threatened to expose your past. The Star Diamond was your prize, but time, it seems, has run out." As Hardy's men took Clara into custody, Poirot turned to Wells. "The diamond, monsieur. Let us retrieve it and end this." They returned to the church tower, where Wells opened the pendulum's compartment, revealing the Star Diamond, a gem of breathtaking clarity. Glinting at 4:13, the truth had been uncovered. But Poirot knew one final gathering was needed to tie up the loose ends. Chapter 13. The final deduction. The grand hall of Lord Reginald Ashford's manor was a study in opulence. Its high ceilings adorned with gilded mouldings, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors gazing down upon the gathered assembly. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, flickering light, reflecting off polished mahogany furniture and the gleaming faces of antique clocks that ticked in unison. A reminder of the relentless march of time. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his diminutive figure commanding attention despite the grandeur surrounding him. His moustache was impeccably groomed, his patent leather shoes gleamed, and his silver-topped cane rested lightly in his hand. A silent partner in his methodical unraveling of the mystery that had gripped. Thornwick before him sat the key figures of the case, their expressions a mix of apprehension, curiosity, and defiance. Lord Ashford occupied a hubbaked chair, his monocle glinting as he adjusted it with a trembling hand. Miss Eleanor Price, Gideon Wells' apprentice, stood to one side, her face pale but resolute, her hands clasped tightly before her. Inspector Hardy leaned against a wall, his arms crossed, his skepticism tempered by the events of the previous night. Gideon Wells himself, newly returned from his self-imposed exile, sat quietly, his haggard features softened by relief but shadowed by the weight of betrayal. And then there was Clara Beaumont, her wrists bound by cuffs, her once elegant demeanour marred by a scowl as she sat under the watchful eyes of two constables. Dr. Simon Holt, his shoulder bandaged, was absent, recovering in the village infirmary. But his role in the conspiracy loomed large. The star diamond, retrieved from the church clock's pendulum, rested on a velvet cushion atop a small table beside Poirot, its facets catching the light like a captive star. The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clocks, a chorus that seemed to underscore the gravity of the moment. Poirot had gathered them here, in the heart of Ashford's domain, to lay bare the truth, to reveal the guardian of time, the murderer of Thomas Carver, and the orchestrator of Gideon Wells' disappearance. The traps set at the old mill had ensnared Clara Beaumont, but Poirot knew the final deduction required a meticulous recounting of the case, a performance as precise as the mechanisms Wells crafted. Madame et Messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the tension like a finely tuned chime. We stand at the culmination of a puzzle most intricate, a mechanism of greed, betrayal, and murder concealed within the ticking of Thornwick's clocks. The disappearance of Monsieur Gideon Wells, the murder of Monsieur Thomas Carver, and the secret of the star diamond have woven a tapestry of deception. But tonight, with the aid of the little grey cells, I, Hercule Poirot, shall reveal the truth. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the assembly, noting each reaction. Ashford's jaw tightened, Wells' gaze dropped to the floor, Miss Price's breath caught, and Clara's eyes narrowed, her defiance undimmed. Hardy shifted his weight, his expression unreadable. Poirot continued, his tone measured but firm. Let us begin at the beginning, Nan, for it is in the first tick of the clock that we find the seed of this tragedy. Poirot stepped toward the table, lifting the star diamond gently, its brilliance drawing every eye. This gem, the star diamond, is the heart of our mystery, a jewel of unparalleled value, entrusted to Monsieur Wells by Lord Ashford to be hidden within a clock, safe from thieves. But secrets, Mies, Amos, are like gears. They turn, and in their turning, they draw others into their motion. Monsieur Wells, a craftsman of genius, crafted a clock with a hidden compartment. Its mechanism stopped at 4:13 a time that marks not only the diamond's concealment, but a past theft. A crime Lord Ashford sought to bury. Ashford's face reddened, but he remained silent, his fingers gripping the arms of his chair. Poirot turned to Wells, who nodded slightly, confirming the truth. Oui, Poirot said. Monsieur Wells was loyal, but loyalty made him a target. He vanished, leaving behind a pocket watch, stopped at 4:13, and a note. The truth ticks in silence. This was no flight, but a deliberate act to protect the diamond and expose a traitor, the one he called the guardian of time. Poirot set the diamond down and picked up the coated ledger, its pages worn from scrutiny. This ledger, decoded with the aid of Mademoiselle Price, revealed transactions for rare clock components, including one called Ashford's Folly, a clock, commissioned by my lord, designed to conceal the diamond. But it also pointed to others. Dr. Holt, who purchased an expensive part, and Monsieur Carver, whose dealings with Wells were shrouded in secrecy. And then there was Madame Beaumont, whose connection to Carver was more than mere rumour. Clara's lips curled into a sneer, but she said nothing. Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping against the polished floor. Monsieur Carver, an antiques dealer with a taste for rare treasures, learned of the star diamond. He conspired with Dr. Holt, who used his position to gain Wells' trust, to steal the gem. But Carver's greed made him reckless, and he crossed the one person who would stop at nothing to possess the diamond herself. Madame Clara Beaumont. He turned to Clara, his eyes piercing. Madame, you were not merely Carver's lover. As the village whispered, you were his partner in a scheme far older than this case. Years ago, you stole the star diamond, a crime lord Ashford covered up to protect his family's name. When the diamond resurfaced, entrusted to Wells, you saw a chance to reclaim it. But Carver, your accomplice, grew impatient. He threatened to expose your past, did he not? And so you silenced him with a clock hand from Wells' workshop, a murder as precise as it was brutal. Clara's eyes flashed, but she remained silent, her defiance a mask for her guilt. Poirot continued, addressing the room. The time for 13 was no coincidence. It marked the hour of the original theft, a secret Ashford buried but Wells preserved. In his clocks, the pocket watch, the gear, the church clock, all were clues left by Wells to guide us to the truth. The silent chime, a bell in his workshop that revealed a hidden letter, warned of the Guardian's betrayal, and the Guardian, Mies Amos, was Madame Beaumont. He paused, letting the accusations settle. Ashford cleared his throat, his voice strained. Poirot, this is extraordinary, but do you have proof? Clara was a guest in my home, a friend. To suggest she's a murderer. Proof, my lord, is in the details. Poirot interrupted, his tone firm. In Wells' workshop, I found a glove, scented with Madame Beaumont's distinctive perfume, left behind during her attempt to break in. The ledger's final entry, decoded this morning by Mademoiselle Price, recorded a payment from Carver to an unnamed party Madame Beaumont, who used her charm to manipulate both Carver and Holt. And last night, at the old mill, she revealed herself, attempting to silence Wells and me with a pistol. Had Inspector Hardy's men not intervened, the truth might have been buried forever. Clara's composure cracked, her voice rising. This is absurd. You have no evidence, only theories. I was at the mill to protect myself, nothing more. Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Madame, your actions speak louder than your words. You framed Monsieur Lang, planting a blood-stained tool in his shop. You manipulated Dr. Holt, using his fear to keep him silent. And you killed Carver when he threatened to expose you as the original thief of the star diamond. The glove, the ledger, your presence at the Milthies are not theories, but facts. Turned to Wells, whose eyes were fixed on Clara, a mix of sorrow and anger in his gaze. Monsieur Wells, Poirot said, you suspected Madame Beaumont, did you not? That is why you left clues, why you hid, why you trusted no one but Mademoiselle Price. Wells nodded, his voice low. Clara was Ashford's confidant. She knew about the diamond, about the clock. I trusted her, but when Carver started asking questions, I realized she'd betrayed me. I faked my disappearance to protect the diamond and draw her out. Poirot addressed the room once more. The Guardian of Time was not a protector, but a predator. Madame Beaumont wove a web of deceit, using Carver's greed, Holt's weakness, and Lang's jealousy to conceal her crime. But Time, Mies Amos, is a relentless pursuer. The clocks of Thornwick, with their frozen hands at 4:13, told the truth, and the little grey cells have followed their lead. Clara's shoulders slumped, her defiance giving way to resignation. "You're clever, Poirot," she said, her voice bitter. "Too clever, yes. I took the diamond years ago, and Ashford let me walk away to save his precious name. When it came back to Wells, I saw my chance. Carver was a liability, always talking, always threatening. I had to stop him, but I never meant for it to go this far." The room was silent, the weight of her confession settling over them like dust. Inspector Hardy stepped forward, his voice gruff. "Clara Beaumont, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Carver and the attempted murder of Dr. Holt and Gideon Wells." As the constables led Clara away, Poirot turned to Ashford, whose face was ashen. "Milord, your silence years ago enabled this tragedy. The Star Diamond's curse is not in its brilliance, but in the secrets it inspired." Ashford nodded, his voice barely audible. "I thought I was protecting my family. I was wrong." Poirot placed the diamond back on its cushion, its light dimmed by the truth. "The case is closed, Mies Amos. The clocks of Thornwick may now tick in peace." As the gathering dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes on the diamond. The little grey cells had triumphed, but the cost of truth was always heavy. He knew Thornwick would heal, but the echoes of 4:13 would linger, a reminder that even the silent chime could speak. The following morning, Poirot stood in Wells' workshop, the air filled with the familiar ticking of clocks. Wells, reinvigorated, was already at his bench, his tools gleaming. Miss Price worked beside him, her face bright with purpose. "Monsieur Poirot," Wells said, looking up, "I owe you my life. How can I repay you?" Poirot smiled, adjusting his waistcoat. "Continue your craft, monsieur. Let the clocks of Thornwick sing of time, not secrets. That is payment enough." As he stepped into the village square, the church clock struck noon, its chime clear and true. Poirot tipped his hat to the sky, satisfied but already craving the next puzzle. The truth had ticked in silence, but now it rang out for all to hear. Chapter 14. The ticking truth. The morning sun bathed Thornwick in a golden haze, softening the edges of the village's cobblestone streets and casting long shadows from the ancient oaks that lined the square. The church clock, now repaired by Gideon Wells' skilled hands, chimed 10 o'clock, its clear notes ringing out over the rooftops, a stark contrast to the frozen 4:13 that had haunted the village for so long. Hercule Poirot stood outside the village inn, his overcoat neatly buttoned, his silver-topped cane gleaming in the light. His moustache was immaculate, as always, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the weight of the truths he had uncovered. The case of the clockmaker's secret and Thomas Carver's murder was solved. Yet Poirot knew that the final chapter required a delicate touch-tying of loose ends, a restoration of order and a reflection on the nature of time itself. The village was slowly returning to its rhythms. Shopkeepers swept their stoops, children played in the square, and the scent of fresh bread wafted from the bakery. Yet beneath the surface, the echoes of betrayal lingered. Clara Beaumont's arrest had sent ripples through Thornwick, her confession, exposing not only her crime but the greed and secrets that had festered in the village's heart. The Star Diamond, now safely in Lord Ashford's possession, was to be donated to a museum, a gesture of atonement for his past silence. Gideon Wells had resumed his work, with Miss Eleanor Price as his partner, and the clocks of Thornwick ticked once more in harmony. But for Poirot, the case was not merely about solving a murder, it was about understanding the human heart, its desires, and its capacity for deception. He adjusted his hat and made his way to Ashford's Manor, where a final meeting had been arranged. The manor's gates stood open, the gravel path crunching under Poirot's polished shoes as he approached. The butler, a stoic man named Perkins, greeted him with a nod and led him to the grand hall, where the events of the previous night had unfolded. The room was less imposing in daylight, its chandeliers dim, its clocks ticking softly. Lord Ashford awaited him, seated at a long table, his face lined with fatigue but softened by resolve. Beside him sat Gideon Wells and Miss Price, their tools spread out as they worked on a small clocker symbol, perhaps of their renewed partnership. Inspector Hardy stood near a window, his notebook open, his expression one of grudging respect. For Poirot's methods, Monsieur Poirot, Ashford said, rising to greet him, his voice heavy with gratitude. You have done Thornwick a great service. The truth, though painful, has set us free. Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes gleaming. My lord, the truth is like a clock, it requires care to keep it running, but once set right, it brings order to chaos. I am pleased to have been of service. Ashford gestured to the table, where the star diamond rested on its velvet cushion, its brilliance undimmed by the morning light. This gem has caused too much suffering, he said. I've arranged for it to be donated to the British Museum, where it can be admired, not coveted. My family's name has borne the weight of its secret for too long. A wise decision, Poirot replied, his gaze lingering on the diamond. Its beauty is matched only by its danger, Nan. It drew out the worst in those who sought its greed. Betrayal, murder. Wells looked up from his work, his hands steady as he adjusted a gear. I should have seen Clara's true nature, he said, his voice tinged with regret. She was so charming, so interested in my work. I never suspected she'd use that knowledge against me. Miss Price placed a hand on his arm, her expression gentle. You trusted her, Mr. Wells, as did we all. But thanks to Mr. Poirot, the truth came out. We can move forward now. Poirot nodded, his eyes softening. Mademoiselle, your loyalty to Monsieur Wells was the key to unlocking this mystery. Your work on the ledger, your courage in the face of danger, these were the ticks that kept the clock of justice moving. Hardy cleared his throat, stepping forward. I'll admit, Poirot, I thought you were chasing shadows with all this talk of silent chimes and guardians. But you were right. Clara's behind bars, Holtz confessed to his part in the scheme, and Lang's cleared. I've sent my report to the chief constable, and they're calling you a miracle worker. Poirot waved a hand dismissively, though a faint smile curved his lips. Not a miracle, Inspector, but method. The little grey cells, they observe. They connect, they deduce. And in this case, they followed the rhythm of time itself. He paced the room, his cane tapping lightly, his mind replaying the case's intricacies. Let us reflect, Mies Amos, on how this began. Monsieur Wells, entrusted with the star diamond, crafted a clock to conceal it. Its hands stopped at 4:13, a time that marked a theft years ago. A secret Lord Ashford buried to protect his family. When Madame Beaumont learned the diamond had resurfaced, she saw her chance to reclaim what she had once stolen. She enlisted Monsieur Carver, whose greed made him a willing partner, and Dr. Holt, whose weakness made him pliable. But when Carver threatened to expose her, she acted with the precision of a clockmaker, using a sharpened clock hand to silence him. He paused, turning to Ashford. "My lord, your silence enabled her, but your decision to entrust the diamond to Wells was born of trust. Monsieur Wells, in turn, protected it at great cost, faking his disappearance to draw out the traitor. The clues he left, the pocket watch, the gear, the silent chime, were his masterpiece, a mechanism to reveal the truth." Wells nodded, his eyes bright. "I knew Clara was close to Ashford, but I didn't realize how far she'd go. When I suspected she'd told Carver about the diamond, I had to act. Hiding was the only way to keep it safe until someone like you, Mr. Poirot, could piece it together." Poirot's gaze shifted to the diamond, its light a silent witness to the case's resolution. "The time for 13 was the key," he said. "It marked the original theft, a moment Madame Beaumont thought buried. But time, Mies Amos, does not forget. It ticks on, revealing what is hidden." The silent chime, the hidden bell in Wells' workshop, spoke of betrayal. The gear, the notes, the church clock, they were the ticks of truth, leading us to Madame Beaumont. He turned to Hardy. "Inspector, you have ensured justice is served. Madame Beaumont will face trial, and Dr. Holt's confession will clarify his role. Monsieur Lang, though guilty of theft, is no murderer. The village may heal now, its clocks, free of secrets." Hardy nodded, closing his notebook. "We've got enough evidence to put Clara away for good. Holt's talking, too. He's admitted to helping Carver plan the theft, but he swears he didn't know about the murder." Lang's back at his shop, grumbling but relieved. Poirot smiled faintly. "And so, the mechanism is reset, Thornwick. Clocks tick in harmony, and the star diamond will shine in a museum, far from the hands of greed." Ashford rose, extending a hand. "Mr. Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. You've saved my family's honor and brought peace to this village. If there's anything I can do—" Poirot shook his hand, his grip firm. "My lord, let the clocks of Thornwick be your legacy, not the diamond. Support Monsieur Wells and Mademoiselle Price in their work. That is all I ask." As the meeting concluded, Poirot stepped outside, the cool air refreshing after the warmth of the manor. Wells and Miss Price followed, their faces bright with purpose. "Mr. Poirot," Miss Price said, her voice earnest, "will you stay in Thornwick a while? We'd love to show you the new clock we're building." Poirot chuckled, adjusting his hat. "Mademoiselle, the offer is tempting, but London calls, and the little grey cells, they crave a new puzzle. Perhaps one day I shall return to hear your clock sing." Wells clasped his hand. "You've given me back my life, Poirot. I'll never forget it." Poirot bowed slightly. "And I, monsieur, shall never forget the silent chime that spoke so loudly. Au revoir." As he walked back to the inn to collect his belongings, Poirot's thoughts turned to the case's deeper meaning. Time, he mused, was both a tyrant and a teacher. It had driven Clara Beaumont to murder, Wells to hide, and Ashford to conceal a painful truth. Yet it had also revealed their secrets, its relentless ticking a mirror to the human soul. The little grey cells had triumphed, but Poirot knew that each case left its mark, a reminder that even in the quietest villages, the heart of man could be as complex as the finest clock at the inn. Mrs. Glover greeted him with a steaming cup of tea. "Leaving us, Mr. Poirot?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "Thornwick won't be the same without you." "Madame," Poirot replied, sipping the tea, "Thornwick has its clocks, and they will keep its heart beating. As for me, I go where the mysteries call. By noon, Poirot was on a train bound for London, the countryside rolling past in a blur of green and gold. He leaned back in his seat, his eyes half closed, his mind replaying the case, the pocket watch, the silent chime. The star diamond each had played its part in a symphony of deduction. The truth had ticked in silence, but now it rang out, clear and true. As the train's whistle sounded, Poirot smiled to himself. The little grey cells, he murmured, they triumph when time reveals its secrets. And with that, he turned his thoughts to the next puzzle, knowing that somewhere another clock was ticking, waiting for Hercule Poirot to set it right. Chapter 15. The echoes of time. The clatter of the train's wheels was a rhythmic lullaby, a mechanical heartbeat that soothed Hercule Poirot as he sat in the plush confines of a first-class compartment. The date was July 12th, 2025, 2 days since he had bid farewell to the village of Thornwick, where the mystery of the clockmaker's secret and the murder of Thomas Carver had been unravelled with the precision of a finely crafted timepiece. In his waistcoat pocket, a simple silver pocket watch, Gideon Wells' parting gift, ticked softly, its hands marking the passage of time with quiet dignity. Poirot's polished shoes gleamed in the afternoon light streaming through the window. His bowler hat rested on the seat beside his neatly folded overcoat, and his silver-topped cane leaned against the armrest, a silent companion to his thoughts. Outside, the English countryside unfolded in a tapestry of green fields, hedgerows, and distant church spires, bathed in the golden haze of a late July day. Yet Poirot's sharp eyes, framed by the faintest lines of fatigue, saw not the rolling hills, but the intricate gears of the case just concluded. The star diamond, that radiant gem of calamity, was now destined for the British Museum, its curse of greed and betrayal lifted by Lord Ashford's act of atonement. Clara Beaumont, the guardian of time, languished in custody, her confession exposing her as the murderer of Carver and the architect of a web of deceit. Gideon Wells and his apprentice, Miss Eleanor Price, had resumed their work, their clocks ticking in harmony once more. And yet Poirot's mind, those relentless little grey cells, could not rest. For every solved mystery left echoes, faint whispers of questions unanswered. He withdrew the pocket watch, its silver case cool against his fingers, and studied its face. The time was 3:47, a mundane hour, yet it reminded him of 4:13, the frozen moment that had haunted Thornwick's clocks. That time, etched into a pocket watch, a gear, and the church clock, had been Wells' silent cry for justice, a clue to unmask Clara's betrayal. Poirot smiled faintly, his moustache twitching. The truth, he murmured, it ticks in silence, but it always finds a voice. His reverie was interrupted by the train's whistle, signalling their approach to London. Poirot replaced the watch and gathered his belongings, his movements precise and deliberate. The city awaited, with its bustle and mysteries, and he was eager to return to his orderly flat at Whitehaven Mansions, where a cup of tisane and a quiet evening might restore his equilibrium. Yet he knew, as surely as the sun would set, that another puzzle would soon call, for the world was never short of secrets. Upon arriving at Paddington Station, Poirot navigated the crowded platform with his usual elegance, his cane tapping a steady rhythm against the stone. The air was thick with the scent of coal smoke and the chatter of travellers, a stark contrast to Thornwick's quiet lanes. A porter, recognizing the distinguished gentleman, offered to carry his small valise, but Poirot declined with a polite nod. "Mercy, but I travel lightly, monsieur. The burden of the mind is enough." He hailed a taxi and settled into the back seat, directing the driver to his flat. As the cab wove through London's bustling streets, Poirot's thoughts returned to Thornwick. The village had been a microcosm of human nature, greed in Clara, loyalty in Miss Price, regret in Ashford, weakness in Dr. Holt, and envy in Victor. Lang, each had played their part in the mechanism of the mystery, and Poirot had set the gears right. Yet the case lingered, not for its complexity, but for what it revealed about time itself, force that both concealed and exposed the heart's darkest desires at Whitehaven Mansions. Poirot's valet, George, greeted him with a bow. "Welcome home, sir," he said, taking Poirot's coat. "I trust your time in the country was productive." "Most productive, George," Poirot replied, adjusting his cufflinks. "A murder solved, a diamond recovered, and a village restored to order. But now I require a tisane, something soothing, perhaps chamomile, the evening paper." George nodded and disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Poirot to settle into his armchair by the fireplace. The flat was a haven of symmetry, its polished surfaces and neatly arranged books a reflection of Poirot's need for order. He opened the pocket watch, checking its time against the mantel clock, and found them in perfect accord. "Bon," he murmured, satisfied. The evening paper, delivered by George alongside a steaming cup of tisane, carried no mention of Thornwick Small Mercy, as Poirot preferred his cases to fade from public view once resolved. He sipped the tisane, its warmth easing the faint ache of travel, and turned his thoughts to the future. London was a city of mysteries, its streets teeming with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Yet before he could lose himself in anticipation, a knock at the door startled him. George answered, returning moments later with a card on a silver tray. "A visitor, sir," he said. "A Miss Eleanor Price from Thornwick." Poirot's eyebrows rose, his curiosity piqued. "Mademoiselle Price. Show her in, George, at once." Miss Price entered, her appearance slightly altered from their last meeting. Her simple dress was replaced by a smart travelling suit, her auburn hair neatly pinned beneath a modest hat. Yet her eyes carried the same earnest intensity, tempered now by a hint of unease. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice steady but urgent, "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but I had to come. Something's happened in Thornwick, and I didn't know who else to turn to." Poirot rose, gesturing to a chair. "Mademoiselle, you are never a disturbance. Please, sit and tell me what troubles you. The little grey cells, they are at your service." She sat, clutching a small handbag, her fingers nervous. "It's Mr. Wells," she began. "He's fine, thank goodness, and the workshop is thriving. But yesterday, a strange letter arrived at the shop, addressed to me. It wasn't signed, but it mentioned the Star Diamond and 413, I thought. The case was over, Mr. Poirot, but this feels like a warning." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his interest fully engaged. "A letter, you say? May I see it?" Miss Price reached into her handbag and produced a folded envelope, its edges slightly worn. Poirot took it, noting the Thornwick postmark, dated the previous day. The handwriting was unfamiliar, a sharp contrast to Wells' precise script. He opened it, reading aloud. "Miss Price, the diamond may shine in a museum, but its shadow lingers in Thornwick. The hour of 4:13 is not yet past. Guard your steps, for time watches." He set the letter down, his mind racing. "This is most curious, mademoiselle. The case, it was closed, the diamond secured, Madame Beaumont arrested, and yet this letter, suggests a lingering secret. Tell me, have there been other disturbances in Thornwick since my departure? Miss Price nodded, her voice low. Small things, at first. Tools misplaced in the workshop. A clock that stopped at 4:13 despite being wound. Mr. Wells thought it was coincidence, but after the letter, he's worried. He sent me to you, saying you'd know what to do. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled the little grey cells. They do not believe in coincidence, mademoiselle. This letter, it is a new gear in the mechanism, a hint that the clock of Thornwick has not yet finished ticking. I shall return with you to investigate, but first, we must consider who might have sent this. He rose, pacing the room, his cane tapping lightly. Madame Beaumont is in custody, Dr. Holt recovering, and Monsieur Lang exonerated. Lord Ashford, he seeks atonement, yet someone in Thornwick, perhaps beyond, knows of the diamond's history and seeks to unsettle you. The question is, why? Miss Price's eyes widened. You think it's connected to the diamond, but it's gone, safe in London. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone cautious. Or perhaps the diamond was not the only secret. Let us return to Thornwick, mademoiselle, and see what new mystery awaits. The journey back to Thornwick was swift, the train's rhythm a familiar companion. Poirot and Miss Price arrived by evening, the village square bathed in the soft glow of The church clock chimed 6, its hands moving freely, no longer frozen at 4:13, yet the air held a subtle tension, as if the village sensed the return of unease. At Wells' workshop, Gideon greeted them with a weary smile. Mr. Poirot, I didn't expect to see you so soon, he said, wiping his hands on an apron. Eleanor told you about the letter. Oui, Monsieur Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the workshop. The clocks ticked in harmony, but one, a small mantel clock, caught his attention. Its hands stopped at 4:13. This clock, he said, pointing. When did it stop? Wells frowned, approaching it. Yesterday, after the letter arrived. I wound it myself, but it stopped again this morning. I thought it was a fault in the mechanism, but now. Poirot examined the clock, his fingers tracing its brass fittings. A faint scratch near the base suggested tampering. This is no fault, monsieur. Someone has interfered, perhaps to send a message. Tell me, who has access to the workshop? Only Eleanor and I, Wells said. The door is locked at night, but the window was found open yesterday morning. I thought it was carelessness, but perhaps. Poirot nodded, his mind already forming connections. We must investigate, but discreetly. The sender of this letter wishes to unsettle you, to draw attention. We shall not give them the satisfaction. Over the next hours, Poirot and Miss Price combed the workshop, searching for clues. A faint trace of lavender perfume lingered near the window, a scent Poirot recognized from Clara Beaumont's glove, yet Clara was in custody. Could an accomplice be at work? He questioned Wells about recent visitors, learning that a man in a dark coat had been seen near the shop, asking about clocks but leaving no name. Poirot's investigation led him to the village where Mrs. Glover, the innkeeper, confirmed the stranger's presence. He was here 2 nights ago, she said, polishing a glass. Quiet fellow. Paid in cash, asked about Mr. Wells' work, left before dawn. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Describe him, madame, if you please. Tall, thin, with a scar on his cheek, she replied. Kept his hat low, like he didn't want to be seen. The description sparked a memory. Carver's housekeeper, Mrs. Dunham, had mentioned a shady gentleman arguing with Carver before his death. Could this be the same man? a shadow from the diamond's past. Poirot resolved to trace him. But first, he needed to secure the workshop. That night, Poirot set a trap, stationing himself in the shadows of the workshop with Wells and Miss Price. The clocks ticked softly, their rhythm a backdrop to the tense silence. At precisely 4:13, a figure appeared at the window, prying it open with a tool. Poirot signalled to Wells, who lit a lantern, illuminating the intruder. Man matching Mrs. Glover's description, his scar stark in the light. "Arates," Poirot called, stepping forward. The man froze, his eyes darting to the door, but Wells blocked his path. "You are the one who sent the letter, Nan. Who are you, and what do you seek?" The man's voice was low, defiant. "I'm nobody, Poirot. Just a man looking for what's owed me. The diamond was mine by right, before Clara stole it." Poirot's mind raced. "You were her partner years ago in the original theft. You seek to reclaim it, or perhaps to punish those who profited." The man sneered but said no more as Inspector Hardy, summoned by a prearranged signal, arrived to take him into custody. The stranger, identified as James Harrow, was a known thief with ties to Clara's past. His letter and tampering were an attempt to scare Wells into revealing any remaining secrets about the diamond. As dawn broke over Thornwick, Poirot stood in the square, the church clock chiming a new hour. The village was at peace, its secrets laid bare. Harrow's arrest closed the final chapter of the diamond's curse, and Poirot felt the weight of the case lift. He turned to Miss Price and Wells, who stood beside him, their faces bright with gratitude. "Monsieur, mademoiselle," he said, tipping his hat, "Thornwick is yours once more. Let your clocks sing of time, not shadows." As he boarded the train back to London, Poirot opened the pocket watch, its hands ticking steadily. The echoes of time had spoken, and the little grey cells had answered. Another mystery awaited, somewhere in the city's heart, and Poirot was ready. Chapter 16. The final chime. The village of Thornwick lay bathed in the soft glow of a late July morning, its cobblestone streets gleaming with dew, its ancient oaks whispering in the gentle breeze. It was July 17th, 2025, a week since Hercule Poirot had left the village, having unravelled the mystery of Gideon Wells' disappearance and Thomas Carver's murder. The Star Diamond, that radiant harbinger of greed, was now en route to the British Museum, its curse lifted by Lord Ashford's Act of Atonement. Clara Beaumont languished in a London cell, her confession as the guardian of time sealing her fate. Yet Thornwick had invited Poirot back for a ceremonial unveiling new clock, crafted by Wells and his apprentice, Miss Eleanor Price, to mark the village's renewal. Poirot, ever drawn to symmetry and closure, had accepted, his silver-topped cane tapping lightly as he stepped from the train onto the familiar platform. The air carried the scent of fresh bread and blooming roses, a stark contrast to the tension that had gripped Thornwick during his last visit. The church clock, its hands no longer frozen at 4:13, chimed 10 o'clock, its clear notes echoing across the square. Poirot adjusted his bowler hat, his moustache impeccably groomed, and surveyed the village with a keen eye. The clocks of Thornwick ticked in harmony once more, but Poirot's little grey cells remained alert, sensing that even in peace time could hide secrets. He was met at the station by Miss Price, her auburn hair neatly pinned beneath a simple hat, her face bright with purpose. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice warm, "we're so glad you could come. The village wants to honour you, and Mr. Wells has something special to show you." Poirot bowed slightly, his eyes twinkling. Mademoiselle, it is I who am honoured. To return, Thornwick has left its mark on Hercule Poirot, and I am eager to see your new creation. But tell me, all is well in the village, Nan? Miss Price hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing her features. Mostly, yes. The workshop is thriving, and the village is healing. But there's been a small matter, nothing like before, but odd. I didn't want to trouble you, but Mr. Wells thought you should know. Poirot's interest sharpened. A small matter, you say. The little grey cells, they are never troubled by puzzles, no matter how small. Tell me more, as they walked. Toward the village square, Miss Price explained. A few days ago, a customer came to the workshop, a stranger, asking about a clock Mr. Wells made years ago, one with a peculiar chime. He was insistent, almost aggressive, and left when we couldn't help him. Then yesterday, we found a note slipped under the door, with just 2 words, "Time remembers." It's probably nothing, but after everything. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind already turning. "Time remembers," he murmured. "A curious phrase, mademoiselle. And this stranger, what did he look like?" "Tall, with alt text. Thin, with a scar on his cheek," she replied. "He wore a dark coat and kept his hat low, like he didn't want to be recognized." The description stirred a memory. James Harrow, the thief connected to Clara Beaumont's past, had a similar scar, but he was in custody. Poirot filed the detail away, his instincts prickling. "We shall investigate, mademoiselle, but first let us attend this ceremony. The little grey cells, they work best when the heart is at ease." The square was alive with activity. Villagers gathered around a draped platform where the new clock would be unveiled. Lord Ashford stood at the front, his demeanour subdued but earnest, his monocle catching the sunlight. Gideon Wells was beside him, his hands calloused from work, his eyes bright with pride. Inspector Hardy, his notebook tucked away, nodded to Poirot, a rare smile softening his gruff features. The villagers, from bakers to farmers, whispered their gratitude as Poirot passed, their faces reflecting a community reborn. Ashford stepped forward, his voice carrying over the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather to celebrate Thornwick's renewal and to honour Hercule Poirot, whose brilliance restored our peace. This clock, crafted by Gideon Wells and Eleanor Price, is a symbol of time moving forward, free of secrets." The drape fell, revealing a magnificent tower clock, its face adorned with intricate carvings of vines and stars, its hands gleaming gold. A single chime, clear and resonant, rang out, drawing applause. Poirot clapped politely, his eyes studying. The clock's designer masterpiece, yet its chime echoed the silent chime of the case, stirring his curiosity about Miss Price's mysterious note. After the ceremony, Poirot joined Wells, Miss Price, and Ashford at the manor for tea. The grand hall, now a place of warmth rather than confrontation. The star diamond's absence was palpable, its velvet cushion replaced by a tray of scones. Over tea, Poirot broached the new mystery. "Monsieur Wells, Mademoiselle Price, this note time remembers, and the stranger with the scar, it suggests a shadow from the past. Tell me everything." Wells frowned, setting down his cup. "The stranger came 3 days ago, asking about a clock I made for a private client, a small mantel clock with a chime that played only at midnight. I told him it was sold years ago, but he seemed to think I was hiding it. The note came the next night, slipped under the door." Poirot sipped his tea, his mind racing. This clock, monsieur, what was its significance? It was a commission for a gentleman in London, Wells said. He wanted a unique chime, one that played a melody he provided. I never knew his name, only that he paid well and insisted on secrecy. The clock was delivered through an intermediary, and I never saw it again. Miss Price added, the stranger mentioned a melody, something about stars and shadows. It felt personal, like he knew more than he let on. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Stars and shadows, a phrase, not unlike the star diamond's legacy. This clock, it may hold a secret tied to the diamond's past. We must find it. The investigation began that afternoon. Poirot, Wells, and Miss Price searched the workshop's records, uncovering a faded invoice for the midnight chime clock, addressed to a Mr. Charles Vane in London, dated 10 years prior, around the time of the diamond's original theft. Poirot's instincts flared. Vane could be linked to Clara Beaumont or James Harrow. A visit to the village and revealed that the stranger, who called himself Mr. Gray, had stayed briefly, paying in cash and asking about Wells' old commissions. Poirot enlisted Hardy's help, who traced Vane to a London address, now abandoned. A call to Scotland Yard confirmed Vane was a known alias of a jewel thief, rumoured to have worked with Clara before her betrayal. The clock, it seemed, was a trophy of that theft. Its chime, a coded message, perhaps a map to another hidden gem or a confession of past crimes. That evening, Poirot set a trap at the workshop, suspecting the stranger would return. He stationed Hardy's constables in the shadows, while he and Wells waited inside, the clocks ticking softly. At midnight, the window creaked open and Mr. Gray slipped inside, his scar stark in the lantern light. Poirot stepped forward, his cane raised. Monsieur Gray, or should I say Vane, you seek the midnight chime clock, Nan. The man froze, his eyes darting to the door. You're meddling in things you don't understand, Poirot, he growled. That clock is mine. Before he could flee, Hardy's men seized him. Under questioning, Gray revealed, as Charles Vane admitted, he'd been Clara's partner in the original diamond theft. The clock's chime, he claimed, held a melody that encoded the location of a second gem hidden years ago. Clara had betrayed him, keeping the star diamond, and he'd spent a decade searching for the clock to reclaim his share. Poirot returned to the workshop, where Wells found an old sketch of the clock. A hidden compartment in its base, triggered by the midnight chime, could hold a note or key. With Vane in custody, Poirot and Wells travelled to London, tracing the clock to a private collector's estate. The collector, unaware of its significance, allowed them to examine it. At midnight, the chime played a haunting melody of stars and shadows. A panel opened, revealing a note, coordinates to a safe deposit box in Paris. Poirot, with Hardy's assistance, retrieved the box, finding a small sapphire, less grand than the star diamond but a relic of the same theft. It was donated to the museum alongside the diamond, closing the final chapter of Thornwick's secrets. Vane faced trial, his confession tying him to Clara's past. Back in Thornwick, Poirot stood in the square as the new clock chimed noon, its sound a promise of peace. Wells and Miss Price, now partners, thanked him, their workshop thriving. Ashford, his honour restored, pledged to fund a clockmaking school. Hardy shook Poirot's hand, muttering, "You're a menace, Poirot, but a damn good one." As Poirot boarded the train to London, the pocket watch ticked in his pocket, a reminder that time always reveals its truths. The final chime had rung, and Thornwick was free. Poirot smiled, his little grey cells already craving the next mystery somewhere in the city's heart.